That year, I pulled out my teeth one by one, ground them into powder, and fed them to my parents as milk powder. They thought I was mentally ill and forcibly sent me to a mental hospital. Only my innocent and lovely younger sister treated me as a normal person. She would visit me every 3 days, and each time she would bring my favorite snack. But later I found out that my younger sister at school had been constantly suffering from bullying, to the point where now she had fractures all over her body and was lying in the hospital's intensive care unit. Yet those bullies, relying on their status as minors, did whatever they wanted. They didn't know that the one they had been constantly bullying had an older brother who was not only a minor, but also mentally ill. At this moment, in the mental hospital, "Bro, I brought you your favorite cake. This is something I got for you with my pocket money, carefully prepared." Outside the ward, a neatly dressed girl, her face beaming with an innocent smile. This girl was precisely my younger sister. She was not yet an adult. I was only 1 year older than my sister, but I already looked like an unusually tall big brother. "Today, I'm not feeling very well. It seems I have a fever, so I might not be able to stay with you for too long. You must be good in the hospital, okay?" Then she opened her arms and hugged me. Seeing this, I tentatively reached out my hand. It was very soft, as if I had returned to my childhood. When everyone else was blaming me, only my younger sister was willing to stand up and help me. I couldn't control my emotions, and I didn't know why I had become like this. I only knew that ever since I could remember, that almost twisted emotion had been difficult to control. But just as I looked up, I found a large bruise on my younger sister's neck. There was a small wound at the corner of her eye. If you didn't look closely, you wouldn't be able to spot it. As someone skilled with knives, and a patient who had repeatedly caused injury to others, I was all too familiar with such situations. The scar on her neck was caused by a blunt object striking the muscle. The small wound at the corner of her eye looked more like it had been cut by a pencil sharpener, and was ultimately left behind. I carefully examined my sister's clothes again. I noticed her left sleeve was stained with a greenish pigment, and her third finger trembled uncontrollably, as if her nerves had lost control. I wanted to reach out and roll up my sister's sleeve, but my sister recoiled as if startled, quickly stepping back several paces. "Brother, I'm fine. I just have a fever. I'll come back in a few days." The girl showed a brilliant smile. Even the surrounding nurses couldn't help but glance at my sister a few more times. But now I seemed unable to comprehend the consequences these scars entailed. I often couldn't control my emotions and caused harm to certain things. My sister said she was fine, so she must be fine, right? I frowned. "Oh brother, I still have a small bag of jelly here. You used to love eating it. But this time remember to eat it sparingly." The girl blinked her eyes. That bag of jelly contained almost a month's worth of her usual amount. She held it in her hand, looking particularly strained. The surrounding nurses all seemed to sense that something was amiss. Her tone sounds like she's making final arrangements. This was none of their business, and they were too lazy to ask more. After she finished speaking, the girl left, looking back after every few steps. I stood blankly at the door of the ward, gazing at the departing girl. A vague, inexplicable emotional fluctuation stirred within me. Will she come back? I asked myself this question, but could not get any answer. In the following days, that inexplicable emotional fluctuation grew even stronger. Every day I would sit at the door of the ward, waiting blankly. This guy has been a bit strange lately. He's neither doing business nor anything else. Every day he just sits at the door, and we don't know what he's thinking. Maybe he's getting better. Why care so much? Anyway, as long as he doesn't hurt anyone, it's a good thing. Many caregivers were discussing amongst themselves. To be honest, during these 4 years, deep down they were scared away by me. No matter what methods they used on me, I would recover completely the next day. And if they dared to use electroshock or beatings, I would repay them tenfold, and without a trace. So much so that later, no one dared to trouble me anymore. What these people didn't know, however, was that ever since I was 7 years old, I had actually activated a skill proficiency system. From childhood to adulthood, I used various methods to improve my skill proficiency. Although I didn't show many things, but zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, combat, knife usage, including all 18 martial arts, had all been raised to max level. Especially during these 4 years in the mental hospital, with nothing to do, every day I dedicated myself to improving my skill levels. Just half a year ago, after I raised my last assassination and stealth skill to its extreme, there was nothing left for me to learn. Before, my sister would visit once every 3 days. Will she come today? At this moment, I sat at the door, staring at the wall clock. My sister usually came after school, most of the time around 6:30 p.m. Even if she was delayed by something, it wouldn't be past 7 p.m. But strangely, today it was already 7:20 p.m., yet my sister still hadn't arrived. That anxious and uneasy feeling spread boundlessly at this moment, as if something important was being peeled away from the depths of my heart. Time froze at 2 a.m. My expression was somewhat grim. Back in my room, I lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. Subconsciously, I picked up the remote control and turned on the TV. The moment I turned on the TV, a news report was prominently broadcast. Recently, in Shanghai, several women died unexpectedly. A new body was discovered in Blind Mountain. The method of the crime was extremely brutal. The police have currently sealed off the scene. I believe the killer will be caught soon. Immediately followed by a live report, but I recognized that that body was definitely not my sister's. My sister wasn't that tall. Her legs weren't that long either. Moreover, the body had a mole on its left hand. I clearly remembered my sister's left hand was exceptionally fair and smooth. The one who died wasn't my sister. So, will he come tomorrow? Amidst the sound of the TV, I gradually fell into a deep sleep. But the next evening, my sister still didn't come. What was even stranger was that my parents would come once every week. Today was Sunday. My parents should have arrived in the morning. But by evening, I still hadn't seen any sign of them. Have I been abandoned? I felt my body was very itchy. I kept scratching with my hands. The itch seemed to penetrate deep into my bones. It gave me the illusion of almost going crazy. Eventually, I even started banging my head against the wall. I don't know how much time passed. My forehead was already covered in blood. Yet I was like a cold machine, tireless. Until, due to excessive force and eventually losing too much blood, I fell into a coma. Only then did the nurse discover me and bandage my wounds. The doctor also arrived. Looking at me on the hospital bed, with vacant eyes, and devoid of any emotion, he let out a long sigh. He then asked the surrounding nurses about the situation over the past 2 days. The doctor's brows were tightly furrowed. You mean his parents didn't come today? The other nurses nodded. A new junior nurse even added, yesterday was supposed to be the day for his sister to visit. But she didn't come either. The doctor seemed to understand something. I walked out of the ward, took out my phone, and made a call. After a long while, the doctor returned again. Only, there was a touch more pity on his face. Your parents have some important matters to attend to these past 2 days. That's why they were delayed. They will definitely come to see you once they're done. As for your sister, she just has a cold and a fever. I believe she'll recover soon. My eyes flickered, then returned to a dead stillness. Afterward, the doctor then had someone give me 2 more tranquilizer shots. Only after everything was over did he lead the people out of the ward. Just sick? I climbed out of bed. Recalling my sister had said she had a fever. She would get better soon. My parents, perhaps it was because my sister was sick. That's why they didn't come to see me. Thinking this in my heart, yet it felt as if another soul was tearing at me. Something might have happened to your sister. Even though you are mentally ill, your parents haven't given up on you all these years. Even if your sister had a fever, leaving one person to watch her would be enough. Why, for an entire day, neither your dad nor your mom came to visit you? My hollow eyes suddenly became somewhat distorted. I took a deep breath. Then I got off the bed and walked towards the outside. A nurse by the door wanted to call out to me, but seeing I was heading towards the restroom, she didn't say anything. But when I reached the restroom door, a female nurse happened to be washing her hands. As she washed her hands, I stared blankly. I came up behind the female nurse, covered her mouth with my hand, and gently tapped the back of her neck. The force used was just right. Once the nurse fell unconscious, I dragged her into the men's restroom, pulled off her white lab coat and put it on myself, then hung her ID badge on my chest, put on the cap, then walked straight out. Soon, I arrived at the entrance of the mental hospital. Stop. It's already past the time for the night shift to leave. If you want to leave, first get a permit. What if I don't have a permit? The 2 security guards at the entrance frowned. They realized something was amiss. Just as they were about to speak again, I suddenly charged forward. Before they could sound the alarm, one was heavily punched in the abdomen. The security guard who was hit doubled over, too much pain to even speak. The other security guard tried to rush into the guardroom, but was struck in the face by a black object, and fell to the ground. The object I threw was precisely the keyring that the other security guard was handing over. Then I quickly ran over, and delivered a fierce kick to the figure at the guard booth's entrance. landing on their chest. Seeing that the opponent had lost the ability to resist, only then did I heave a sigh of relief. Using that blood-stained key, I opened the iron gate in front of me. I stood outside the mental hospital, breathing in the air deeply. The air outside was indeed better than inside. Although I knew it was a psychological effect, that feeling of freedom made me tremble all over with excitement. It had been 4 years since I'd been home, but I was still clearly excited about the way home. 2 hours later, I returned to the familiar doorstep of my home. I reached out to knock on the door, but quickly pulled my hand back. I turned and entered the adjacent alley. Using both hands and feet to brace against the walls, I slowly climbed up. Then I climbed in through a second-story window. It was completely dark inside. I frowned as I opened one door after another. My dad, mom, and younger sister were all not home. But I discovered, on the table next to the television, there was a hospital bill. Payment amount, 35,861 yuan. Below it was clearly my dad's signature. Opening another bag, several CT scans showed a small, thin figure. Their hands, feet, and ribs all had multiple fractures. Even the middle finger of their left hand had a section of bone shattered. Recalling a few days ago when my sister came to see me, that uncontrollably trembling finger, I seemed to understand something. Someone had used the way I treated the little mouse on my sister. This kind of scene was all too familiar to me. Precisely because it was familiar, I knew every method and tool used in the crime. The injuries on her hands, caused by a blunt object, could be a stone, an overturned table, or even a hammer. The ribs looked more like they were broken from a fall from a height, caused by a stone. Her legs, however, were forcibly stomped and broken. In the past, when I saw such things, I would feel incredibly excited, wishing I could do it myself. But when I saw what was inside the CT scan, I opened my mouth, but couldn't utter a single word. An indescribable emotion made me feel breathless. Just then, outside, suddenly, there was the sound of the main door opening. I quickly stuffed everything back and hid behind the cabinet. Soon, the lights in the living room were turned on, and a gaunt figure, with a head full of white hair, walked into the room. It was my old man. He was clearly fine when I saw him last. I could only occasionally find a few white hairs on his head. Now, in just one short week, he had aged decades. Dad came to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and made several phone calls saying yes, yes, yes. Brother Wang, can you lend me another 20,000 yuan? I'll definitely pay you back when I have money. Second uncle, you know my current situation. I'm planning to sell the house. Please lend me some money first so I can gather the medical expenses. Big sister, I beg you, I know it's 20,000. Just 20,000 is enough. He made a total of 7 calls. Dad's voice sounded incredibly humble, as if afraid of saying anything wrong. They just hung up the phone. 20,000 yuan doesn't sound like much, but it's not something my current family can come up with. Although what they said was unpleasant, the money was eventually borrowed. Some lent 4 or 5,000 yuan, others lent 7 or 8,000. After borrowing from every single relative and friend, over 25,000 yuan was transferred to Dad's card. Seeing that the money had finally arrived, the man who had raised me since childhood, tolerated me, even willing to sell his shop to pay for my medical treatment, collapsed onto the sofa. His slightly gaunt figure looked more like someone gradually aging, yet a peerless hero standing tall against the heavens. It made me, hiding in the shadows, unable to stop my eyes from welling up. But the temporary respite was soon broken by a phone call. A sharp female voice came from the other end. What I told you before, how have you considered it? My daughter is underage right now, and her grades are good. Even if she does something excessive, she won't be punished by law. You'd better be sensible. Don't end up not getting the money and delaying your daughter's treatment. Hearing that woman's voice, Dad slammed his fist on the table, seemingly furious to the extreme. I've already gathered the medical fees, but we know you haven't fully gathered it. Don't you know your family's situation yourself? This time it's just 20,000, but what about the subsequent surgery fees? 100,000, 200,000, or even 400,000 or 500,000, it's not impossible. I advise you, it's best not to act impulsively and delay your daughter's treatment. Get lost. Dad screamed hysterically. A scornful laugh came from the other end, and the phone was hung up. Dad smashed the cup in his hand onto the table in front of him. With a bang, the table was smashed to pieces. The cup also shattered. His hands were covered in blood. Dad seemed to feel no pain. He lay on the sofa, his eyes vacant. But soon, Dad pushed the door open and left again. He was probably going to pay for my sister's medical expenses. I, hiding behind the cabinet, walked out silently in the darkness. Before, I didn't understand what minor meant, but just now, I heard their conversation again, and it was still half understood. So, am I also considered a minor at 15? I scratched my head. Then I flipped over and climbed out the window again. As I climbed down, I heard something drop not far away. From a distance, I saw a girl in blue clothes with a few boys of similar age. The fallen item was a can of red spray paint. When I walked out, I found the outside walls sprayed with all sorts of vulgar words. I frowned. I could still faintly hear the girl in blue and the boys cursing. Even in the hospital, they can't stay quiet. People like that should just die in the hospital. What's the point of taking us to the police station? After saying that, they sprayed a few more words on the wall. When I walked out, they didn't seem to care. I advise you to pretend you didn't see anything. Otherwise, you'll be the one out of luck later. The girl aimed the spray paint in her hand at me. But after seeing my face clearly, it turned out to be somewhat similar to Chen Kuer, who was in the hospital. She suddenly remembered Chen Kuer once saying she had an older brother. It's just that no one had ever seen him. Seeing that they had been discovered, the leading girl not only showed no fear, but instead boldly shouted a few times and ran off with her group, their mouths still making cheering sounds. One of the boys even gave me the middle finger. For some reason, in my heart, an inexplicable emotion surged. I then closed my eyes and took a deep breath. A cruel smile appeared at the corner of my mouth. I followed them silently. If it came down to physical strength, how could these youths possibly be my match? However, this group of people was clearly very smart. At a corner, they immediately scattered to lose me. I didn't chase after those boys. Instead, I kept my eyes on the girl holding the red spray paint. Even the biggest fool could see that the girl was the true culprit. It took nearly half an hour, but I finally cornered the girl at the alley entrance. The girl shook the spray paint can in her hand. If you dare touch me, you're dead. Your sister deserved what she got, and so do you. I heard these words but didn't get angry. Instead, I broke into a happy smile. My eyes gradually turned wild. Then I snatched up a stone from the ground. I walked towards her step by step. What are you doing? I'm telling you, I'm a... Suddenly, a loud thud echoed through the alley. The stone accurately and unerringly struck the girl's forehead. The girl, who had been backing away, only felt a wave of dizziness and collapsed to the ground. Yet she still couldn't stop cursing. I'll make sure you die a horrible death. I'll have my boyfriend kill you. Your sister left the hospital. Didn't she still have to go to school? No matter which school she goes to, I'll make her wish she were dead. Is that so? My voice was flat. Only when I looked at the bleeding wound on the girl's forehead did I feel my body tremble in spasms. An inexplicable sense of comfort filled me deep inside. Then I stomped my foot down on the girl's wrist. I heard a distinct crunch. The girl let out a blood-curdling shriek. At that moment, a trace of fear appeared in her eyes, but she still couldn't stop threatening me, saying, "Do you know who my dad is? My family owns a company. We can easily spend a bit of money to have you killed. I'll make my dad break all your limbs, and then destroy your entire family." The girl's voice was hysterical, but what awaited her was still my utterly cold face. I stepped on the girl, on the callus of her wrist, almost supporting my entire weight, constantly twisting and exerting force. The girl cried out in pain, tears streaming down. She tried to pull her hand back, but the back of her hand was already a bloody mess. Until not far away, a panicked voice pulled me back from my frenzy. "Zay, what are you doing here?" It was my mother's voice. Holding a lunchbox, she stood at the alley entrance, staring blankly at the bloody scene before her. I suddenly snapped back to my senses. I didn't want my mother to see this sick side of me again, but the far end was a dead end. Couldn't leave at all. Mother slowly walked closer. She wasn't frightened by my frenzied state. "Mom." My voice trembled. I wanted to cover my face so badly, yet I was afraid if I rushed out, Mother would stop me, and I might end up hurting her. The woman outside, however, merely had reddened eyes and extended her hands, coming forward to embrace my head. The nearly deranged me became sober at this moment. The girl, whose wrist had been crushed, the girl, a bloody mess, took advantage of this opening, scrambled to her feet and frantically rushed outside. "I'll make sure you all die a terrible death." The girl's voice was sharp. Surprisingly, and the woman who called Dad from the room, their voices were somewhat similar. Mother also recognized the girl. Her initial pain turned into anger. Then, unwillingly, tears streamed down. "Son. I'm sorry, my son. And I'm sorry for your sister. It's all my fault. I failed to protect her. Mother, her face streaked with tears, reached out and caressed my face. I didn't utter a sound. I just nestled in my mother's embrace. Until more than 10 minutes later, Mother seemed to remember something. I still have to deliver things to your sister. You go back first. But go back where? The mental hospital? Mother clearly also thought of this question. It seemed my earlier madness made her afraid I would do more pathological things. She quickly called a Didi, ride-hailing car, and personally sent me back to the mental hospital, helping me get back inside the mental hospital. Watching Mother leave outside, her eyes full of tears, I didn't say a word. I just often let out a breath. The surrounding nurses also saw me, the bloodstains on my shoes, and my downcast face. Not one of them dared to step forward. And after I returned to the ward, I began to wait in silence. Until the next morning, many people came outside the mental hospital. One of them, a man in a suit, pushed aside the doctor in the white coat in front of him, constantly slapping a pile of documents on the table. On the documents were my medical records, and everything related to them. This man in the suit even came to the outside of my window, staring venomously at the person inside. Me. Only then did I realize this man resembled the girl from last night. The man picked up a photo and pointed to the girl in it, confirming my guess. I will make your life worse than death. Although I couldn't hear the man's voice, I could discern from his lip movements the meaning of that sentence. Faced with the man's threat, I merely climbed to my feet and walked to the edge of the window. I slowly parted my lips. My stark white teeth and emotionless eyes, under the illumination of the light, made my half-white, half-black face feel eerily terrifying. The man in the suit took a step back, his gaze turning dark and malicious once more. He snorted and turned to leave. He's the father of that girl from last night. I merely stomped and broke his hand. And he got so angry? But my sister suffered multiple fractures all over her body. To this day, she's still lying in a hospital bed, her life hanging in the balance. I smiled, a very happy smile. Like a devil. A moment later, the man left. But on the doctor's desk lay several stacks of money, as well as a check. 500,000 written in large print on the check. Stood out remarkably. The doctor in the white coat seemed to be constantly struggling between the two. Around 8 p.m., the doctor stood up and put the money into his bag. He entered the infirmary and grabbed something, then walked towards my room, looking at me sound asleep inside. The complexity in his eyes was self-evident. But in the end, he still hung the 4-drip on the wall. He skillfully drew out a needle, connected the tube and aimed it at the back of my hand. In the dim environment, the doctor in the white coat stared for a long time. Just as he was about to inject, my cold eyes suddenly snapped open. An eerie smile appeared on my face. Witnessing this scene, the doctor who was about to act, an inexplicable fear surged into his heart. He stood up, just about to step back. A pair of large hands had already grabbed his collar. The tremendous force made the doctor in front of him utterly unable to resist. He wanted to cry for help, but his mouth was tightly muffled. Immediately after, that needle then pierced the doctor's skin. He struggled a few times. Then his body began to heat up, experiencing hand tremors, heart palpitations, dizziness, and other symptoms. I looked up and clearly saw insulin written on the glass bottle. The few characters were clearly visible. Once the doctor stopped struggling, I picked up his body and returned to the infirmary. Perhaps because of the staff the other party had arranged in advance. Whether it was the nurses outside or the cameras, they couldn't see anything anymore. Originally, they wanted to put me to death, but unexpectedly, they indirectly helped me out. All traces were cleaned up. I once again inserted the syringe into the doctor's hand. Then I turned and returned to my own ward. Around 3 a.m., the screams of doctors and nurses pierced the silent night sky. The dead doctor was discovered. Many people came from outside. Only I remained in the ward, holding a 500,000 check, flipping it up and down. Besides that, there was also a slip of paper with a phone number and an address written on it. The dead doctor's name was Wang Yang. He used to be an attending physician at a large hospital. Later, he took 50,000 yuan from a patient during surgery and also caused the patient's death. He got into trouble. If it hadn't been proven that the accident was unrelated to him, he would probably be in jail by now. But because he accepted a patient's red envelope, he lost his job at the hospital. After being introduced by acquaintances and friends, and pulling many strings, he only then came to this mental hospital. These pieces of information were all things I had previously learned from nurses. It wasn't just Wang Yang. Throughout the entire hospital, I kept everyone's information in my heart. After the police arrived, they quickly began investigating the matter. But because Dr. Wang Yang had made preparations beforehand, they couldn't find any problems at all. In the end, the matter was also put on hold. After all, this is a mental hospital. If the other nurses and caregivers had no issues, then there was only one last reason. It was done by a mental patient. Even if they wanted to pursue it, it would be extremely difficult. After a whole night of commotion, the people finally left. The next day, as soon as dawn broke, I, as usual, sat blankly on the stool by the door, looking outside. It wasn't until my father arrived that my expression showed a slight change. It seemed like it had been over a week since we last met. Seeing my dad again, his eyes were a little moist. All the recent changes that happened at home left him mentally and physically exhausted. It's even very likely that even the expenses I need for the mental hospital cannot be fully covered anymore. Botsy's dad stepped forward and hugged him tightly. Tears unconsciously slid down his wrinkled face. As he hugged me, a faint ripple stirred within my heart. I reached out and patted my dad's back. My dad came to his senses. He stared at me blankly for several seconds, seemingly not expecting that his mentally ill son would also comfort him. "You went home before, didn't you?" I nodded. My dad sighed. "You saw the things on the table, didn't you?" I didn't say a word, but from the slight change in my gaze, my dad also guessed. "Your sister is still in the hospital's intensive care unit. Her ring finger has a comminuted fracture, and there are multiple scars on her body left by shield chi. It's Dad's fault. I'm useless. I couldn't protect you, and I can't give you a rich life. But Dad's capabilities are only this much, Botsy. I'm sorry," my dad said, opening the things he brought in. He took out an apple from inside. After peeling it, he put it into my hand. I didn't put it in my mouth. Instead, I calmly said, "Last night, a man came. Wearing a suit, he kept staring at me from outside the window. He looked very much like the girl I injured. Perhaps because I am a mentally ill employee, and not very old. Even if the police were called, it couldn't be handled. So the other party didn't choose to call the police. Instead, they bribed the doctor at the mental hospital with money. What people didn't expect was that nothing happened to me. Instead, the doctor died that night." Hearing this, Chun Yongzheng, who understood his son's character perfectly, seemed to understand something. He then patted my shoulder. A flicker of struggle flashed in his eyes again, but he kept his fists clenched and didn't say a word. In the end, he still sighed deeply. He didn't want to harm me. Compared to the son I once was, I have changed a lot now. At least I don't lose control of my emotions at the drop of a hat. It is precisely because of these changes over the past 4 years that they have come to regard me, their son, with renewed hope. You don't need to worry about your sister's matter. Dad will handle it his own way. I didn't say a word. I neither agreed nor disagreed. I just hung my head low, burying my entire face in the shadows. Son. Chun Yongzheng sighed once more. His expression grew even more despondent. He realized that as the head of the family, he couldn't change anything at all. That deep sense of powerlessness drained all his strength. His aged face looked particularly lost and helpless. If Dad, you can't handle it, then come and get me out." Chun Yongzheng seemed to have heard the most incredible thing. Take his son out? What did he mean by that? A nearly manic mental illness, unable to control one's emotions. Once he unleashed his true nature, the consequences would be unpredictable. It would also be tantamount to indirectly ruining his own life. The truth was, curing him would probably be impossible. I know you want to help Dad and you want to help your sister, but I can't let you be ruined." Dad stayed in the ward and accompanied me for a full half day. The father and son talked a lot. Today, my emotions were exceptionally stable. I didn't seem like a mental patient at all, but rather like a high school student. Yet all of this was merely me forcefully suppressing my emotions. After a moment, watching Dad leave, my face, which had been buried in the shadows, finally emerged. The face that should have been calm gradually became distorted. There was another kind of devil in my heart, gradually surfacing within me. Your dad can't handle it anymore, can he? He's already this old. The other party is powerful and influential. Your old man would only be going to his death. He can use 500,000 to buy your life inside the hospital. He can use 1 million or 10 million to destroy your family, making your sister, lying in the hospital, wish she were dead. Think about your sister's current situation. Will she still be able to visit you in the future? The voice in my heart was like a devil's temptation. slowly breaking down my mental defenses. I stared intently outside, from noon until evening, like a wooden stake until the sky completely darkened. I looked at the quilt behind me. I stuffed miscellaneous items into it, and took out a black plastic bag from under the bed. Inside was precisely my jean from last time, the white lab coat left by the nurse. Plus, in my other hand I held fruits and snacks. Now they finally came in handy. So, is everything all right now? They thought my sister and my parents were easy to bully. They thought that, in the mental hospital, I could only be slaughtered at will. In the pitch-black room, a ghostly moan echoed softly. I also noticed the nurses outside. The caregivers would change shifts in half an hour. Time passed bit by bit. Half an hour was up. I took advantage of this window and changed into the white lab coat. I left the room silently, head lowered. After the shift change was over, the nurse saw a bulge in the quilt on the bed from outside the window. Thinking I was still in the room, she didn't pay much attention. I wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, I went to the monitoring room. Inside the monitoring room, a security guard was playing a mobile game. He wasn't paying any attention to the monitors at all. When the security guard inside the room, needing to urinate urgently, turned and went out with his phone. I then entered and deleted the surveillance video of myself leaving the ward. The whole process only took dozens of seconds. When I left again, the security guard hadn't even finished using the restroom. I then, from an outside hidden spot without surveillance, climbed out over the wall. Once again breathed the clear air within. I laughed, and this time my laugh was particularly telling. Immediately, I took out that piece of paper from my pocket, a slip of paper with a phone number and address written on it. It clearly marked the location of a villa complex. Following the location, I quickly found the place. This was indeed a villa where rich people lived. From afar, it appeared heavily guarded, grand and magnificent. Just on both sides of the entrance, there were several professional security guards. I even saw numerous cameras. But these were too minor for me. They couldn't stop my advance at all. I stealthily infiltrated it. In my hand, at some unknown point, appeared a silver surgical knife. When I arrived at Villa No. 8, the address in question, and climbed up the wall to the second floor, I saw a figure inside through the window. Coincidentally, Zhou Shushua took out her phone and said in the group chat via voice message, "Tomorrow you guys go to the hospital and check on that bitch. It'd be best if you could pull out her oxygen tube. That bitch's brother injured me. I won't let him off easy either." After sending this voice message, Zhou Shushua lay down on the bed, revealing a satisfied smile. Yet, it was precisely these words that made me, who was outside, climb from the railing to the balcony. Just like that, standing rigidly outside the balcony, in the dim moonlight, the silver surgical knife gleamed with a suffocating luster. The lying Zhou Shushua seemed to sense something. Drowsily, she turned her head. When she saw my face, she instinctively widened her eyes. Terrified, she tried to scream. Currently, I fiercely smashed the glass and burst in. "What do you want to do? Doing this is illegal. Don't you know it's illegal? When you guys hurt my sister, did you ever think about breaking the law?" I lunged forward and stepped on the hand wrapped in gauze. Zhou Shushua let out a piercing scream and was slapped in the face. Immediately after, I grabbed her head and dragged her into the hall like a dead dog. Just then, a security guard's inquiry suddenly came from outside. "Miss Zhou, are you all right?" Hearing this, Zhou Shushua tried to call for help, but the cold scalpel on her neck made her feel a chill in her heart. "There's nothing, there are mice in the room." Hearing these words, the security guard outside said a few words, then left after checking. Seeing everything return to normal, I grabbed Zhou Shushua's hair and dragged her to the bathroom, and started filling the bathtub with water. Once the tub was full, I directly pressed Zhou Shushua's head, submerging it in the bathtub. After about half a minute, I pulled her out again. Zhou Shushua choked on several mouthfuls of water. She seemed enraged, and no longer showed her previous fear. Instead, she threatened, "My cousin won't let you off. My boyfriend won't let you off either. My parents will make your life a living hell." Even at this point, she was still spouting arrogant nonsense. Zhou Shushua's pampered and willful nature from childhood was fully displayed. Her eyes glared at me venomously, wishing she could tear me limb from limb. But I merely stood with my back to the bathroom light, revealing a morbid smile. It was then that Zhou Shushua remembered that the person in front of her was a psychopath. The information her father brought back yesterday stated that I was only 15 years old, not much older than her. More importantly, in that document were records of all the perverse things I had done, such as directly stabbing through someone's palm with a pencil, or, if things didn't go my way, smashing people's heads bloody with rocks. Even more, in a fit of rage, I had injured my own parents. Such a person, with almost no rationality, a psychopath, could you expect to reason with or threaten her? Wasn't that a joke? I'm wrong, please let me go, okay. I'll definitely get my parents to pay for your sister's medical expenses and cover them. I'll never again send people to cause trouble at your house, as long as you let me go. I can pretend this whole thing never happened, just consider it, that my issues with your sister are wiped clean. Besides, I wasn't the only one who bullied your sister. With so many people bullying her, one more or less doesn't matter. Why do you have to make things difficult for me? Faced with Zhou Shushua's words, I didn't say a word. I pushed her head into the water again. After about a minute, Zhou Shushua struggled desperately in the water, choking on several mouthfuls of water. She even peed herself. Pungent, foul smell filled the bathroom. Seeing this, I grabbed her hair and yanked her out. Zhou Shushua's eyes were wide with terror, but then she heard a commotion outside. The voices of several security guards reached her ears. It's in there. We heard some strange noises just now. Felt wrong. So we called the police. You guys go in and see what's happening. Then the sound of a door lock clicking open reached my ears. I wasn't in a hurry to kill Zhou Shushua, because I wanted this girl in front of me to endure the same pain as my sister. Immediately, I raised my right leg and stomped down hard on Zhou Shushua's joint. With a sickening crack, the bone in her joint shattered. I grabbed her hair again and slammed her head against the wall, repeatedly. Piercing screams and cries echoed throughout the bathroom. By the time Zhou Shushua's face was covered in blood, I used the surgical knife in my hand to sever the tendons in her ankle. Then, like a demon, I licked my lips. At this moment, Zhou Shushua was terrified to the extreme. Tears mixed with blood continuously streamed down her face. I was wrong. Please don't torture me anymore. Can't I just apologize to your sister? I'll never call her a bitch again. Please let me go, okay. I merely wiped the blood from the scalpel onto Zhou Shushua's clothes. Then I ran to the balcony and jumped down towards the ground. The security guards currently on watch outside immediately pulled the alarm. In an instant, the entire villa area became chaotic. But even though these security guards had some skill, they were no match for me at all. In just a few minutes, they lost track of me. The police who rushed upstairs broke open the door. All they saw was in the bathroom the horrific sight of Zhou Shushua. Zhou Shushua still hadn't recovered from her terror, her mouth continuously muttering, I was wrong. Please let me go. I'll never dare again. I will definitely go apologize to your sister. Even the experienced police officers, seeing this scene, couldn't help but gasp. Who did this? What kind of hatred would make someone torture a person like this? However, one police officer recognized the person in front of them and recalled a case from not long ago. It was also an old father who came to report a case, saying their daughter had fallen from a building, suffering full body fractures. Before jumping, she had suffered inhumane abuse. They followed the clues and quickly found the suspects. One of them was Zhou Shushua. At the time, Zhou Shushua was unrepentant, boasting wildly at the station and verbally abusing the old father. Because she was still a minor, no deeper processing was ever conducted. Who would have thought that seeing Zhou Shushua again would be in such a scene? His first thought was of that tall, thin, old father whose hair had turned white overnight. But then he thought again. Something wasn't right. Because the figure who had just jumped out of the window was clearly young and strong, more like a young man of 18 to 20. Seeing that the person had already fled, they could only call for emergency services. More than 10 minutes later, an ambulance took the person to the hospital. Zhou Shushua's parents also received the news. They quickly arrived at the ward where the patient was. Looking at their daughter, intubated with an oxygen tube, her eyes vacant, and a faint trace of fear still on her face. The man, dressed in a suit and carrying a briefcase, punched the wall. He seemed to have thought of something and said ominously, It's him. It's definitely him. There's no one else it could be. Clearly, he had already received some clues from the police. He probably already guessed who it was. After all, the one who fit all the characteristics was only the one residing in the mental hospital. But my identity is also that of a minor. What's even more terrifying is that I carry a get-out-of-jail-free card. He is a mentally ill witness, and he still lives in the mental hospital. Even on that night before, all the doctors he was familiar with died unexpectedly during the night. Even a fool could figure out what happened. Who exactly is old Zhou? Ever since our daughter was injured last time. Every time I asked you, you wouldn't say. Now our daughter is in this state. Are you still going to hide it from me? I didn't let you know, because I didn't want you to lose your composure over this. There are many things happening at the company recently, and we still need you to handle them. If even you lose your head, what will happen to the company? But the woman clearly wasn't convinced. She snorted, those trivial matters at the company. Are they more important than our daughter? Seeing that the woman was determined to get to the bottom of it, old Joe could only sigh helplessly. He took out a document from his briefcase. The document reached the woman's hands. The woman opened the document, and looking at its contents, couldn't help but feel a thrill of fear. Sent to a mental hospital at age 11. In 4 years, injured over 80 people in total. No matter what methods were used, they would recover completely the next day. Throughout the entire mental hospital, even with more than 20 caregivers supervising in shifts, they couldn't keep an eye on such a child. The above information is still the simplest. That kid is extremely wicked. What I've investigated is just the tip of the iceberg. The first time our daughter was injured, it was he who broke out of the mental hospital. I asked the retired bodyguards around me, and after they watched the video, they all said this kid was extremely difficult to deal with. This is also why I didn't tell you. The woman listened, still unimpressed. Since those bodyguards aren't capable, then spend more money to hire foreign mercenaries. They live in a hail of bullets all day long. Surely they can handle a mere youngster. His wife's words made old Joe cover his forehead with his hand. There was one more thing he hadn't said. In fact, these bodyguards under him were retired foreign mercenaries. Every single one of them was even an elite among mercenaries. Even they said he was very difficult to deal with. That meant it was useless to hire anyone. What's more, on the streets outside the villa area, he had actually arranged a dozen bodyguards to monitor every intersection. The result was that he had silently infiltrated the villa area and crippled their daughter. If you think you have a way, you can find someone yourself. I have to go to the bureau again. And just then, a figure in a white lab coat not far away pushed a small cart and walked over. Please move aside. It's time for the anti-inflammatory shot. Otherwise, if the wound gets infected, the consequences would be unimaginable. The voice was very mature, giving off a dull feeling. The voice in the white lab coat thus passed in front of old Joe and the woman, pushing the cart into the ward. Immediately after, he took out a syringe and attached the needle. Under the overhead light, I only revealed my forehead, eyes, and nose. But Xianxia, lying on the bed, recognized me at a glance. Before she could cry for help, I covered her mouth. The liquid in the syringe in hand, silently injected into his blood vessels. Xianxia struggled for a moment. Then her eyes rolled upwards, and she became motionless. The drug I injected was just a relatively common one, named fuquinotu. Can cause some adverse reactions, and mental derangement is one of them. When I finished injecting the drug and walked outside, old Joe looked up and met my eyes. The two of us passed each other. He only felt I looked somewhat familiar, but couldn't recall who I was until I had walked far away. He glanced again at his daughter in the ward. Xianxia, who had previously kept her eyes open and occasionally mumbled to herself, now lay motionless on the bed, just like a mummy. Old Joe had been in the business world for many years and had encountered countless incidents. He instantly noticed his daughter's abnormality. He quickly pushed open the door and pressed the call button next to him. The doctor was called over. After a series of examinations, the cause was quickly determined. This made old Joe, who was standing nearby, involuntarily break out in a cold sweat. He suddenly understood why the figure in the white coat he had just seen was so familiar. Those eyes, utterly cold, almost devoid of emotion, weren't they the very eyes he had seen in the mental hospital, through the window? It was his mentally ill wife. Hearing him say the words mentally ill, her brows instantly furrowed. Old Joe, that guy is too reckless. There are still police officers guarding outside. Yet he dares to sneak into the hospital, and even inject drugs into our daughter. What is his sister anyway? How can she even compare to our daughter? Just the blood flowing in their bodies, that dirty blood, cannot even compare to one of my daughter's fingers. Old Joe, annoyed by what was being said, shook off his wife's hand. What's the use of telling me? They even dared to come to the hospital, face to face while I was helpless. God knows what will happen next. Tomorrow morning you come with me to meet their parents. Let's cover the medical expenses first. See if we can settle this with money. Hearing her own husband was actually going to give money to the family who hurt their daughter, the wife immediately protested, I don't agree. Why should we give them money? I already told that old geezer to withdraw the case, and then give him a large sum for medical expenses. As a result, even if they remarried, what good would it do? Old Joe snorted. I just got news. The tens of thousands they scraped together earlier are only enough to cover the hospitalization fees. The upcoming surgery will cost at least another 400,000. Even if they sell their house in their remote old place, it would be good if they could get 1 or 200,000 for it. Now is precisely when they desperately need money. As long as we go there and talk to them nicely, I believe they will agree. The wife was still somewhat reluctant, but after glancing at her daughter inside the ward, she also took a deep breath. Since you've already decided, tomorrow I'll go with you. I refuse to believe it, that our vast enterprise can't beat them. What's more, involved in this incident, it's not just our child. If they dare to stand by idly, even if they poke a hole in the sky, I will never let them off easy. After saying that, the couple left behind a good number of people. Only then did they walk out together. When they arrived downstairs, next to a tree not far away, I stood in the shadows and slowly raised my head. This time I wasn't wearing a mask. Under the flickering, dim yellow streetlights, that face, flickering between light and shadow, revealed a terrifying smile. When they walked out, old Joe, upon seeing it, stopped in his tracks. His heart pounded a few times. He inexplicably felt his legs go weak. His wife beside him didn't notice the scene in the distance. She quickly steadied old Joe. What's wrong with you? Didn't you just take your blood pressure medicine? Old Joe swallowed hard. When he looked beside that tree again, the person had vanished. The elusive figure, the suffocating smile, and that twisted face struck old Joe's heart like a heavy hammer. But looking at his unsuspecting wife beside him, he could only take a deep breath. Nothing, I just haven't had dinner. Maybe my blood sugar is a bit low. Meanwhile, on the other side, although I had been very careful, when I escaped from the mental hospital at night, I was still discovered by the caregivers inside. The first to receive the call were my parents. The father, who was looking after Xianxia, heard that his son had again escaped from the mental hospital and couldn't help but feel his eyelid twitch. You mean, my son left the hospital without anyone knowing? Yes, Mr. Chen. It's all our fault for not guarding him properly. Your son's ability to escape is simply too strong. Even our monitoring room couldn't find any clues. So you're saying, now you don't even know where my son is. Sorry, Mr. Chen. We didn't want to. The apology from the other side seemed quite sincere. Even though he had complaints in his heart, Chen Yuzheng didn't continue speaking. He turned and hung up the phone. Chen's mother beside him asked with a worried face, our son escaped again. Chen Yuzheng nodded. His heart was a mix of emotions. Even Chen's mother's throat tightened. Tears fell like beads. Little did they know, outside there was a figure, quietly watching the situation in the ward, including his sister, who was covered in tubes, who was still unconscious. Until a rush of footsteps came from outside, a person wearing glasses. A man who appeared refined and gentle, pushed open the door and walked in. As for me outside, wearing a white lab coat, he simply took me for a doctor. When this person walked into the ward, I could hear my father let out a cold snort. Hello, Mr. Chen. I am the investigator in charge of this case. I heard your son escaped from the mental hospital. Dad nodded. He didn't deny it. The investigator took out another document. As you know, according to the current situation, your daughter's injuries, it's a critical moment for her surgery. Just now, the people involved in the case came to see me and are willing to provide 600,000 in medical expenses. As long as you get this money, your daughter can safely get through this crisis. Dad gritted his teeth. What if I don't agree? The investigator sighed deeply. Your daughter still has to go to school, after all. Those people have unusual identities and backgrounds. Unless you leave Shanghai City, otherwise, once you anger them, the consequences will be unimaginable. And because of this incident, reporters have already broadcast the news, which could easily bring us negative impacts. So we'd like to ask you to withdraw this case. We will try our best to get you as much compensation as possible. Then you'll be a little better off. Hearing this, Chun Mu, who was sitting next to them, angrily slammed the table. Clearly, we are the victims. Why should we be the ones to withdraw the case? The people who harmed my daughter haven't even apologized to us in person yet. Are you only capable of making things difficult for us? An old couple. The investigator was momentarily at a loss for words. The room fell into a brief silence. You should also know the current situation. The other party is a minor. Even if we investigate further, there won't be any results. But how do I remember? Last time, when the people involved in the case were identified, several of them were already adults. Chan Yuzheng stared at the investigator, his gaze seemingly spitting fire. The investigator also narrowed his eyes at this moment, knowing this old couple had no intention of being kind. He then stood up and said in a deep voice, "The warnings you needed have already been given. If you stubbornly refuse to see reason or cause any more trouble, damaging our reputation, don't blame us for turning ruthless." After speaking, the investigator got up and left. In fact, he wasn't really an investigator, but rather an actor sent by the Zhou family. They just wanted to use this identity to pressure the couple, to let them know that their power was not to be trifled with. This way, when negotiating tomorrow, they would back down in the face of difficulty. The investigator's goal had been achieved. He walked down the hospital corridor and entered the elevator. As he arrived on the first floor, I had just used the previous 500,000 check they used to bribe the doctor to pay my sister's medical fees. Earlier, I had also heard the other party's tone of voice. I didn't even need to hear the end to know what this person was here for. Once the procedures were completed, that person happened to be walking to the entrance. I followed him out and saw him get into a black sedan. If I wasn't mistaken, the driver was precisely the Zhou family's driver. I then walked out without hesitation, came to the car window and knocked on it. After a few knocks, and since I was wearing a white lab coat, the fake investigator and the driver assumed I had something to say. They lowered the car window. But at that moment, I punched the investigator in the face, hitting him so hard that he saw stars, and his nose gushed blood. I then quickly opened the car door. Holding a cold surgical knife, I pressed it against the driver's back. The driver saw me in the rearview mirror. He clearly didn't know who I was. "Sir, what you're doing is illegal, do you know that?" But the investigator next to him had seen my file and was drenched in a cold sweat. The person in front of me was a lunatic. What's law got to do with it? An underage mental patient. Even if they broke heavenly laws, you still couldn't shut their mouth. He wanted to remind the driver, but was afraid saying mental patient would anger me. He could only warn him, saying, "Just quickly do what he says. No more talking nonsense." The driver's expression was somewhat gloomy, but there's nowhere suitable to go. The investigator practically yelled it. Seeing this, the driver also realized something was wrong. He could only bite the bullet and drive the car forward. Half an hour later, in an abandoned factory, the two of them were tied up by me. Although the driver was flustered, he still forced himself to say, "This is a society ruled by law now. You should understand the consequences of doing this." I narrowed my eyes. Then what about my sister? She was a perfectly good student. What consequences did those who bullied her face? The driver was stunned. "You're that girl's brother." Regarding my history as a mental patient, currently only the Zhou couple and the investigator knew. The driver didn't know any of this, so he didn't show too much fear. After all, in his opinion, if I wanted to kill someone, I would have acted long ago. "Our young lady is only 14 years old. She's young and ignorant, please forgive her." He seemed to be speaking politely, but in reality, his voice carried a hint of coldness. Seeing this, I raised the scalpel, narrowing my eyes. "So you're saying, your young lady isn't at fault at all?" Just as he opened his mouth, I thrust the scalpel out. With a squelch, it unhesitatingly pierced through the driver's palm. The driver let out a blood-curdling scream, tears mixed with snot from the pain. He yelled heartbreakingly, "Little brother, you still have a bright future ahead of you. Why bother? Mr. Zhou has great power. You can't fight him." Seeing that I heard these words, my face gradually showed a hint of frenzy. The investigator's heart trembled. He whispered, "Look at the documents on the floor." "What documents are you still looking at a time like this?" "See." The investigator raised his voice. When I came in, the documents fell onto the floor, clearly showing my personal page. The driver's eyes swept over it. On his face, which had originally shown some defiance, instantly paled considerably. It starkly stated, 15 years old, sent to a mental hospital for 4 years, injured over 80 people. This was information that hadn't even been fully tallied. In the investigator's mind, the number of truly injured people was definitely more than that. The driver's body stiffened. He mechanically turned his head, as if saying, "Why didn't you warn me sooner?" Seeing that I was about to raise the scalpel again, the driver panicked. "No, Mr. Chen. Everything was arranged by Chairman Zhou. We were just desperately following orders." I looked at the investigator next to me again. The investigator felt a warmth beneath him, and was so scared he peed himself. Even though he had been by Mr. Zhou's side, and experienced countless things, he had never felt such fear as he did now. Before, most tasks were handled with business tactics, or by framing others. But this kind of person, Who scares people senseless on first meeting? Who wouldn't be afraid? That's right, buddy. We were just desperately following orders. Please don't make things difficult for me anymore. Tell me everything you know. Otherwise, I'll pull out the scalpel and stab the driver's thigh again. Instantly, the driver let out a painful wail. He cried, "Don't stab me anymore. I'm scared." The driver had only received 20,000 yuan to do this. He couldn't possibly, for 20,000 yuan, risk his own life. How many people were involved in harming my sister? At this question, both the investigator and the driver paused. How many people? They heard there were about 7 or 8, but they weren't entirely sure of the specifics. Just as I was about to ponder it carefully, I saw my knife raised again, and it was aimed at the investigator. Seeing this, the investigator's heart skipped a beat. He quickly shouted, "More than 7. Besides Zhou Shuxue, who else is there?" This time, both of them were stunned. The investigator's head was buzzing even more. He only knew there were probably 7 or 8 people. As for who exactly they were, that was beyond his knowledge. I don't know, little brother. No, this investigator big brother next to me. He follows CEO Zhou every day, he must know. Seeing that I was about to lay hands on him again, the driver pulled a trick of diverting trouble. My surgical knife also naturally pointed at the investigator next to him. The investigator gave the driver an incredulous look. His teeth couldn't help but chatter. I only know there's one named Wang. He's the young master of the Wang group. His influence is not inferior to the Zhou family. He's also a prominent figure in Shanghai City. As for the rest, they aren't even involved with the bureau. I don't even have the qualifications to contact the Wang group. Pinched my chin. I've been locked up in a mental hospital all these years. I have no idea about what's happening outside. I don't know any Wang group. After releasing the investigator again, I made him write down the address, as well as a few places the other party frequently visited. Then, narrowing my eyes, I tied them up again. Afterward, I walked out on my own and drove away promptly in the black sedan parked outside. Meanwhile, on the bar street, many idle people from society gathered here. As time grew later, the entire city gradually quieted down. Only the street became increasingly lively, and I was squatting across from a bar. I stared at a bar named Misty Moonlight. Watching the time, I occasionally muttered a few doubtful sounds. Time passed bit by bit. It finally stopped at 2:40 a.m. Several drunken figures surrounded a 14 or 15-year-old boy, uttering flattering words like, "Young Master Wang is amazing. Last time at school, I saw you beat that girl up so badly, and you actually managed to smooth things over. And tonight, you even splurged a fortune." Even the bar manager was impressed. If only I had half of young Master Wang's power, I'd be able to live the rest of my life without a care. The complimented young man's expression was hazy, but he also thoroughly enjoyed the feeling of being flattered. Thinking of the injured female student, he felt not the slightest bit of guilt. On the contrary, because he was taken to the police station last time, he resented Chen Xiaomei even more deeply in his heart. It's a pity she didn't obey me that day, otherwise she wouldn't be so miserable now. For someone from a poor family to be toyed with by us, it should be her honor. It's good enough that I didn't find her dirty. Instead, she got me caught. Wang Dong smiled aggressively. At this moment, a blonde guy next to him interrupted, "Young Master Wang. Although I know your family is powerful. Just this morning, I heard some news. I wonder if you know about it." Wang Dong frowned. "What news?" The mysterious Zhou Shuxue was crippled. She's still lying in the hospital now. They say when the police rushed in, she was bleeding from her head, and her Achilles tendons were severed. As he said this, the blonde guy instinctively recoiled. Wang Dong also frowned. He really hadn't heard this news. Perhaps his family already knew, and didn't tell him for fear of him worrying. Even when he came out today, he did so secretly, hiding it from his family. The bar, if what this blonde guy said is true, the matter is indeed strange. But soon, he started talking nonsense. Are those bodyguards from the Zhou family just for show? I heard that. Those people are retired foreign mercenaries. They used to be in constant gunfire and bombardments. Now that they're back in the country, can't they even protect a little girl? Although he felt a little panicked inside, he was still putting on a brave face. When he was about to leave, he had already notified his own bodyguards. They should have arrived by now. Just then, a tall dark figure not far away ran towards him step by step. The several lackeys nearby saw someone approaching. They immediately felt annoyed. "Who are you to dare come near here? Get lost right now." Blondie stepped forward, intending to push me away. But just as he stretched out his hand, he heard a crack. Immediately, Blondie let out a wail. Seeing this, the two people nearby turned and ran. How could they care about young Master Wang? It was obvious at a glance that the newcomer meant no good. He immediately struck with ruthless force upon meeting them. Even if the two of them went up, it wouldn't make any difference. Young Master Wang's throat also bobbed. He was so scared that goosebumps broke out all over his body. At this moment, I pulled out a silver-white surgical knife. Taking a step forward, I swung it at Wang Dong. Accompanied by a silver-white glint, a suffocating sense of oppression washed over him. Wang Dong's legs gave out and he fell to the ground. The silver-white surgical knife grazed the top of his head, slicing off a large piece of flesh with hair. Along with the continuously gushing blood, Wang Dong let out continuous wails. Where was there any of the arrogance from just now when he was boasting about his impressive deeds? Just as I raised the surgical knife again, intending to repeat the process and finish off Wang Dong in front of me, suddenly, a black sedan screeched to a halt, heading straight for me. Seeing this, I frowned and dodged backward. I then saw 3 bodyguards in black suits, shielding Wang Dong behind them. The moment he saw the bodyguards, Wang Dong almost burst into tears. After all, no matter what, he was just a 14-year-old student. Bullying others on ordinary days was fine, but when he truly encountered a tough opponent, he himself was scared to death. As for me, seeing that the other side had brought 3 bodyguards, I was not afraid. Just as everyone was about to make a move, a thin-faced man holding the steering wheel happened to look up and meet my gaze. At this moment, he only felt a chill, emerged from the deepest part of his body, as if what stood before them was not a person at all, but a monstrous beast. They vaguely had a misconception. If they really got into a fight, even if they all had to stay here, after all, they were people who had experienced many trials. Whether they truly possessed it, true ability could be seen at a glance. He, who was already somewhat conflicted, saw me getting ready to jump, took a deep breath. Xianxia said, "Get in the car." Brother Zhao's 3 bodyguards below turned back blankly. Usually, Brother Zhao was the most fierce and combative. He was also the most skilled. Yet, it was Zhao Yong who was telling them to leave. Didn't you hear what I said? I told you to get in the car. If anything happens to the young master, you'll just wait to collect his corpse. Seeing that the 3 bodyguards below weren't obeying, Zhao Yong could only use Wang Dong as a threat. The 3 bodyguards then gritted their teeth, taking the young master into the car and closing the door. The actions were seamless. Then Zhao Yong hit the accelerator and drove straight out. Even if I wanted to chase after them, it was already too late, and having lost track of Wang Dong, I wasn't anxious because I still had the Wang family's address. I didn't succeed this time. There's always next time. They might escape the first danger, but they won't escape the ultimate one. Sooner or later, they'll die by my hand. More importantly, besides Zhou Shushu at Wang Dong, I also needed to know the information of the remaining 5 people, and the one who knew these things best was probably only my own sisters. Class teacher. A moment later at Shanghai No. 12 middle school, the school's security wasn't particularly strict, only a security guard sitting at the entrance. I had 100 ways to sneak in, but I wasn't in a hurry to go in. Instead, I observed the people coming and going from outside, and waited for a long time. A tall and imposing figure finally appeared at the school gate. A woman dressed in black, whom people called teacher. The woman was around 30 years old. Her face held a hint of acrimony and harshness. If any student passing by wasn't dressed strictly enough, she would immediately give them a severe dressing down. If I had seen this situation normally, I would have just thought the school's requirements were strict. But from my sister's description, this teacher was their homeroom teacher. She frequently picked on my sister. In the past, when something happened to my sister, she would also often come running to my house. The most common thing she would say to my parents was, "Why don't they bully others but only bully your daughter?" Putting all other matters aside, didn't your daughter have any fault? Although my parents had their own shopfront in their early years, and ran a business after the shop was transferred out, living in a factory for a long time, had long since worn away their fighting spirit. Moreover, they weren't the sharp-tongued type, so they would more or less be swayed by this homeroom teacher. Now, thinking about all the wrongs my sister suffered, this acrimonious and harsh woman before me had to bear most of the responsibility. Having set my goal, I wasn't in a hurry to act. It was just dawn now, a time when students were coming to class. There were also many parents around, which could easily cause a commotion. I might as well wait until nightfall. Just as I was about to turn and leave, I suddenly saw several figures around the corner staring at me. These people had clearly undergone rigorous training. They were well disguised, but I still spotted them. I merely frowned at these people, then strode quickly outwards. I wanted to test these people to see if they were truly following me. Sure enough, the moment I got up to leave, all of them started moving in my direction. Seeing this, I had nothing left to hesitate about. I led them to a secluded place. The few people who followed, I vanished in an instant. One of the men walking in front, a man with stubble, frowned and picked up his walkie-talkie. He's gone. And I don't know where he ran off to. Immediately after, a displeased voice came from the other side. What's going on? That guy is just a 15-year-old kid. You can't even keep an eye on a child. What good are you? The bodyguard manager, being questioned, wanted to retort, but couldn't say much, because it was indeed his problem. Just as he was about to step forward, suddenly, a silver-white gleam flashed past his eyes. He had experienced many life and death situations before, and relying on his sense of danger, he took a step back, narrowly dodging the blade. When he clearly saw what had just sliced past, it turned out to be a sharp surgical knife. He couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat on his forehead. If his neck had been hit just now, he would probably have had a gash cut open. Even if his teammates nearby had rescued him in time and sent him to the hospital, the chances of him being saved would still be very low. More importantly, the opponent's attack was cunning and ruthless, not at all like a child. Thereupon, he subconsciously wanted to counterattack. But before he could even make a move, another silver-white gleam appeared. It scared him into jumping back again. But the sharp gleam of the blade followed closely, one after another with extreme agility. Even the bodyguards nearby, seeing this scene, couldn't help but have their eyebrows twitch. They wanted to make a move, but the direction of my blade strikes was flawless. While making 5 strikes at the bodyguard manager, I also kept them thoroughly blocked. If they forced their way forward, they would probably fall in a pool of blood the next second. They tried to encircle me from behind, relying on their seasoned experience to launch a pincer attack. But I suddenly accelerated, brushing past the bodyguard manager who was 5 meters away. Immediately after, the bodyguard manager let out a piercing shriek. Subsequently, a slit was cut open across his abdomen. A sharp command. Blood gushed out uncontrollably. The bodyguard captain collapsed at the sound. The few bodyguards who followed were terrified, their scalps tingling. The salary they received each year was only around 100,000. Couldn't compare to the bodyguard managers. Even with professional ethics, they didn't have much. Watching their usual bodyguard manager, who could take down 4 or 5 of them, fall to the ground and not get up, they immediately scattered. Only I was left, dragging the bodyguard manager, driving the previous, black sedan, speeding towards the suburbs. Until I made my clean getaway, those escaped bodyguards returned to the scene. They exchanged glances. Someone took out a walkie-talkie. From the other side came a man's deep voice. Are you guys even capable? I spend 10 million every year to support you people. You can't even deal with a child. What use are you to me? But there was a long silence from the other side, causing the cursing man to unconsciously frown. Chairman, the person is completely gone. The bodyguard manager was taken down in one move, and also taken away by that person. Hearing this, the man on the other side couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Although he had been cursing non-stop just now, he knew the bodyguard manager's combat strength very well. Back then, a rival company had bribed a group of thugs, wanting to attack him. The bodyguard manager, by himself, barehanded, beat those dozen or so thugs into a pulp. From then on, he offered the bodyguard manager a multi-million-dollar, celebrity-level salary. And later, it was indeed proven that the bodyguard manager was highly skilled. Yet such a person, whom he highly regarded, was dealt with by me in a single encounter. This shouldn't be. That kid has always lived in a mental hospital. Where did he get such good skills? He couldn't figure it out no matter how he thought about it. He could only bite the bullet and order, no matter what, to thoroughly investigate that kid's situation. If 4 people aren't enough, then send 10, 20, or even 50. He's loaded. And the Zhou family was also looking for him. I don't believe that kid can escape this inescapable net. Meanwhile, I bought a lot of food from a street vendor. Then I arrived at an abandoned factory in the suburbs. Seeing the driver and investigator still tightly bound inside, I threw the food on the ground. And from the car, I dragged the bodyguard manager out. As for the wound on his abdomen, I had also just bought needles, thread, and alcohol. Currently, I need to get more useful information from these people. Of course, I wouldn't easily kill them. Besides, even if these minor figures die, it wouldn't sate my hatred. After I tied them up, I forcibly stitched up the bodyguard manager's abdominal wound. The alcohol was not treated in any way and poured onto the wound. That intense stinging pain made the bodyguard manager let out a painful wail and woke him from his coma. Gasping for air, when he looked up at me, he was met with a pair of eyes that were cold to the extreme. Those eyes seemed to hide another beast. A flicker of brutality, madness, viciousness, and a storm of other turbulent emotions. Especially seeing the gaping wound on his abdomen. The way my bloodlust was almost uncontrollable caused him to involuntarily shiver. He finally realized why the information the chairman gave them marked me as severely mentally ill. Young man, turn back before it's too late. After the wound was stitched up, security manager Sun Yaoyang couldn't help but offer a warning. The two people nearby also clearly recognized Sun Yaoyang's identity, and all showed an inexplicable look of terror. Who didn't know that the Wang family had 5 highly skilled, ruthless bodyguards? These 5 people usually helped the Wang family do quite a few unspeakable, audacious acts. Among them, Sun Yaoyang was even more renowned. He had repeatedly helped the chairman of the Wang group escape death. Such a terrifying person, yet I cut open his parents and brought them back to this abandoned factory. Just thinking about it made their scalps tingle. Their teeth chattered uncontrollably. Meanwhile, I returned to the car and took out several dog chains. I also tied up the bodyguard manager. Sun Yaoyang, who was quite arrogant at heart, trembled all over with rage. He felt utterly humiliated. Besides these things, I had also bought several rabbits and put them in the car. I had left the mental hospital recently, and the tranquilizers in my system were gradually wearing off. I hadn't taken my medication for a while. Another voice in my mind was appearing with increasing frequency. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to restrain my other self and would become a complete madman. To release this feeling, I needed an outlet for it. Those rabbits were undoubtedly the best choice. I had no qualms. With the 3 people present, I moved all the rabbits from the car. Looking at these rabbits, I subconsciously gulped. The nearly frantic look in my eyes could no longer be restrained. Immediately after, various chilling actions and methods made the driver and investigator beside them feel their stomachs churn. They immediately began dry heaving onto the ground. Sun Yaoyang's eyebrow twitched. At first, he thought I was using this method to threaten him. But gradually, he realized something was wrong. Because from the change in my gaze, he sensed that this was not a threat at all, but was simply venting the pent-up frenzy in my heart. The madness. If these methods, and the way of venting were to fall upon them, Sun Yaoyang, just thinking about it, couldn't help but break out in goosebumps. His mouth, which had been about to speak, instantly shut. After I captured Sun Yaoyang, the hospital where my parents were, however, received a large contingent of people. The one walking in front was none other than Zhou Buwei, chairman of the Zhou family. You should have heard about the Wang family's matter. When we go in later, be a bit more polite with your tone. Absolutely do not push them too hard. Otherwise, it will backfire, Zhou Buwei said as he walked forward. Following beside him was his wife, and also Zhou Shushua's mother. Originally, regarding the negotiation, they had wanted to wait a few more days, to come and have a proper talk when the surgery was closer. But just last night, an old friend at the hospital called him to say that someone had deposited into the Qin family's account 500,000 in medical expenses. Now they no longer lacked this money. Furthermore, with the Wang family's capable subordinate, as soon as the news of Sun Yaoyang's disappearance broke, it made Zhou Buwei even more alarmed. He subtly sensed a feeling of an impending storm, a suffocating feeling of something about to happen. If any more trouble were to arise, the consequences would be unimaginable. As for his wife, who was following behind, although she was still a bit unwilling, she reluctantly followed along. A moment later, in the ICU ward on the 7th floor of the hospital, Zhou Buwei and his wife pushed the door open and walked in. Inside were 2 people only in their 40s, but already with white hair, looking like elders. They remembered that the last time they saw Chen Yuzheng, he only had a few strands of white hair. But now, this figure, looking somewhat gaunt, seemed to have aged by 10 or 20 years. Zhou Buwei let out a soft sigh. He had someone bring a stool, and slowly sat down in front of the 2 elders. But before he could speak, Chen Yuzheng suddenly widened his eyes, and angrily shouted, "Get out. You are not welcome here." Chen Yuzheng, of course, knew why they had come. Ever since he left the mental hospital, he could roughly guess what this son would go and do. Seeing Chen Yuzheng looking so frantic, Zhou Buwei seemed to understand, because when he saw his own daughter lying in the hospital, it was the same kind of frenzied state, but he was a businessman, extremely independent, knowing how to gather the blue sea. "I know you are in great pain. When my daughter was lying in the hospital bed, I also felt as terrible as you do. But what was my daughter's situation? I know it better than anyone. Although she would also form cliques with others at school, she had never done anything that sent someone to the hospital. I am willing to bear all of your daughter's medical expenses. Besides that, I heard you used to have a shop. I can also help you get it back and give you a sum of money as compensation. How about we call it even between our 2 families?" After saying this, he took out his own daughter's accessories and placed them in front of the two people. The father and mother looked at the video. A figure similar in age to their own daughter, her body also covered in tubes, her appearance even worse than their own daughter's. A hint of unbearable pity gradually appeared in their eyes, but soon, their resolve hardened again. It's all your daughter's own doing. Zhou Buwei opened his mouth. His throat felt as if it was blocked by something. Originally, he hadn't intended to bring out the other video. But seeing that these parents didn't seem to be willing to be kind, he could only let out a soft sigh. Because that video involved a great deal concerning those 5 people. Therefore, even though he was suffering great injustice, he could only grit his teeth and endure it. Although his daughter had verbally admitted that she did all of this during this time, who was actually behind it, and who taught his daughter to say this, how could Zhou Buwei not know? I understand the hatred and pain in your hearts, but my daughter is burdened with an undeserved accusation. Wouldn't I be even more heartbroken? After much hesitation, Zhou Buwei once again raised his phone and played another video. This video was not filmed by Zhou Xianxia herself. It was another boy. If you've seen this video, you'll know my daughter was wronged. The couple was somewhat doubtful, but still looked at the video on the phone. Zhou Xianxia in the video quickly appeared before them. Throughout the entire process, Zhou Xianxia stood by, also completely bewildered. Looking at the scene before her, a hint of terror inevitably crept into her eyes. Next to her was a boy in a white shirt, constantly egging her on. Zhou Xianxia, what are you waiting for? Who dash? RY up and do it. Don't you want that business deal for your family? You're just a toy for us to play with. Do you really think you're any nobler than him? If you still don't do it, when we go back we'll call a few more people to make you really feel our power. Zhou Xianxia trembled all over from what was said. Her eyes couldn't help but turn red. Clearly, this wasn't the first time such a thing had happened to her. Therefore, even the boy in the white shirt, seeing that she was slow to act, spat on the ground, then pushed Zhou Xianxia aside. It was unclear what happened next. Until, the camera focused on Zhou Xianxia again. She was already hastily leaving with her backpack. Only her clothes were a bit disheveled. Such a scene greatly shocked Chen Yuzhing and his mother. In their hearts, Zhou Buwei was already considered a prominent figure in Shanghai, a person of standing and reputation. But they never expected that even his daughter would be humiliated so shamelessly. After Zhou Xianxia left in the video, the real abuse gradually began. Just as the two finished watching the video, Zhou Buwei, taking the lead, quickly scrolled to a video of his daughter lying in a hospital bed, a video of her covered in tubes. Using this contrast and the grief in his voice, he said, "Now you should understand who truly harmed your daughter. She's not my daughter at all. As for these perpetrators, I can't say who they are. Because once I reveal them, not only our Zhou family, but also your son, and your daughter will be dragged into this storm. Try to talk some sense into your son. Know when to stop. Don't wait until disaster truly strikes to feel regret. If you stop now, not only can you get Demi's medical expenses, but you can also take over your old shop. Wouldn't it be better to live a good life like this?" Hearing these words, the old couple also stood stunned in place, speechless for a long time. Zhou Buwei didn't lie anymore. Instead, he wrote out a 3-million check and placed it on the table beside them. Then he turned and left. After Zhou Buwei left, the parents stared intently at the check, looking at each other without a word. Just as Zhou Buwei and his wife walked outside, the woman who had been following them suddenly started breathing rapidly. She abruptly stepped forward and grabbed Zhou Buwei. The content in that video earlier was all true. Previously in the room, she was too shocked to speak after seeing the video. It was only after coming outside that she regained her senses. But seeing his wife's astonishment, Zhou Buwei merely curled his lips. "What are you thinking about? In the video earlier, the girl who was humiliated had a large birthmark on her foot. Does your daughter have a birthmark on her foot?" "No. You mean, the video was specially synthesized by someone I hired. Many things in it were edited. Although our daughter took the blame, she hasn't fallen to this extent. The things I said were also a mix of truth and falsehood. Otherwise, those two old fools wouldn't have believed it so easily." Meanwhile, at the entrance of No. 2 Middle School, the sky gradually darkened. Many students had already left the school gate, and I was sitting not far away, silently watching the students come and go. The top priority right now is to get from my sister's homeroom teacher more important information. Although I also questioned Sun Yao Yao, she didn't hold back anything, and told me everything I wanted to know. But it was still too little. Currently, I only know there are a total of 7 perpetrators. Among them, 5 people have a much higher status than I imagined. More importantly, these 5 people are not students of No. 2 Middle School. The day they entered No. 2 Middle School, all video records had already been deleted. And to find out about these people, I can only integrate all valuable clues and not let go of even a sliver of possibility. But I waited until it was completely dark, and the female teacher still didn't appear. Seeing this, I frowned. It was almost 8 o'clock, and continuing to wait would yield no results. So I frowned and went to the intersection, driving away in the black sedan. Meanwhile, at the hospital exit, my mother, Li Yuefan, was holding a lunchbox and a change of clothes. She was going home to prepare daily necessities. But just as Li Yuefan was leaving, at the hospital entrance, more than 10 men with tattoos on their arms were staring intently at Li Yuefan. One of the men with a buzz cut pulled out a photo from his pocket. After a brief comparison, he immediately narrowed his eyes and gave a look to the others. Then, holding machetes, they quietly followed her. And on her way back, Li Yuefan met her sister's classmate, named Zhao Nu. She was fair-skinned and clean-looking, not very tall, but gave off a delicate and charming beauty. After she saw Li Yuefan preparing grain wine nearby. Finally, she found a small jar of paper cranes in her school bag. How is Xiaomei? Seeing this familiar girl, Li Yuefan couldn't help but feel her eyes well up. She remembered how Zhao Minor often used to run to their house to play. How did you get here? Isn't your home in the south of the city? Auntie, I specifically took the bus to come here. I didn't dare go to the hospital, afraid to see Xiaomei in that state. So she hesitated for a moment, then continued. Mom said paper cranes represent happiness and beauty. They can bring blessings. So I folded many, hoping Xiaomei can get better quickly. Can you help me give them to Xiaomei? Zhao Minor's face was full of remorse. She deeply regretted that day when she went home, without waiting for Chen Xiaomei. Her family had a car. If she had waited for Chen Xiaomei to go back together that day, the other party wouldn't have been injured, and everything could still be remedied. Every time she thought of that incident, she felt incredibly uneasy. Li Yuefan's eyes turned even redder upon hearing her words. She took the paper cranes in the transparent jar. Good child, she said. Xiaomei has a friend like you. I'm happy for her. Oh, Auntie, I also brought a blessing bracelet. Can I personally place it under Xiaomei's pillow? Of course you can. Auntie's house is just ahead. Let's go back together. But just as they entered the alleyway, a commotion erupted behind them. Immediately after, 7 or 8 tattooed men blocked off the back of the alley. At the same time, at the front exit, 7 or 8 men with ill intentions also appeared. Some held water pipes, others held iron bars. Seeing such a scene, neither the mother, Li Yuefan, nor the young girl beside her, Zhao Minor, could help but turn pale with fright. Li Yuefan seemed to realize something. Hurriedly shouted, "Don't come over. This little girl is innocent. She's not one of our family. Please let her go back, all right?" But from the exit and the entrance, the dozen-plus men walking over showed not the slightest change in expression. One of the crew-cut men pushed aside his subordinates. He coldly glanced at Li Yuefan and Zhao Min. He bowed respectfully and said, "My apologies, big sister. We take people's money to solve their problems. If there had only been you here just now, then there would have been no problem. But now that he's seen us, we have no other choice." Even the others who had gathered around all nodded at Li Yuefan. They didn't look like street thugs at all. Their speech was orderly. Not only did each of them hold a weapon, they were very polite. Their expressions were equally cold. It was precisely this politeness and coldness that made Li Yuefan's heart sink. She knew these were no ordinary street thugs. I've taken 10 million from them to buy the lives of your entire family. The other party's power is very strong. It's not something we can resist. I know your son is still missing. I've seen his video. His skills are very good, and his methods are extremely cruel. If your son is truly found someday, I'm willing to pay with my life for you. Immediately, the man holding his knife, and the distance between them grew shorter and shorter. This made Li Yuefan and Zhao Minor, who were on the ground, both unable to stop their voices from trembling. Is there anything that can't be overcome? You are all innocent. Why must you get involved in such a business? Facing Li Yuefan's questioning, the crew-cut man's body paused for a moment. My wife owes gambling debts. My 2 children are still missing. They made me pay off these 7 million in gambling debts. If I accomplish this task, not only can I pay off the money and bring back my children and wife, but I can also take a large sum of money and flee far away. They processed my passport for me. several million in some less developed countries, would be enough for me to live comfortably for a lifetime. My sworn brothers likewise received their assurance. They all had their own predicaments. The man with the buzz cut looked up at the pitch-black night sky. I don't want to kill, nor do I want to kill your man. And even less do I want to kill that girl lying in the hospital. Yet, behind me there was an unseen great serpent, pushing me step by step to this very spot. I'll say it again. If one day your son comes looking for us, not just me, but also this group of my brothers, as long as he can defeat us, we are willing to pay with our lives. After he finished speaking, the distance between the two of them was already within arm's reach. The knife in the man's hand slowly rose. The guilt in his eyes refused to leave. He turned his head away and took a deep breath. Just as his knife was about to fall, a whooshing sound suddenly came from not far away. Immediately after, a fist-sized object, with lightning speed, smashed onto his forehead. With a loud bang, the buzz-cut man's body swayed. An intense wave of dizziness swept over him. His vision seemed to be veiled by darkness. The other men around also turned their heads to look at this moment, only to see, under the moonlight, I was walking over, dressed in white. In my hand, I held a surgical knife with a silvery sheen. My head was slightly raised, and a trace of savagery showed in my eyes, causing everyone present to involuntarily twitch their eyelids. This simply didn't resemble a human's gaze. It was more like that of a savage beast, caged for many years, with nothing left but fighting and slaughter. A trapped beast that had already lost all other emotions. Even the buzz-cut man, who had been hit on the forehead, couldn't help but have his knife-holding hand tremble. He instantly stabilized his stance. His gaze then turned icy cold again. Then, gripping the long knife in his hand, he strode step by step past everyone. The many subordinates around him wanted to help. But the man stopped him, saying there was no need. Do you still remember the photos you saw? He is that woman's son. I said that if he brought a true opponent, my life could be his. Since he has come here, I don't want to take advantage of his weakness. Young man, do you dare to fight a barehanded match? The man with the buzz cut threw his long saber onto the ground. He stretched his neck. I also tucked my scalpel into my waist. My foot shifted back slightly. Like a swift cheetah, I swiftly charged forward. In that instant, the two brushed past each other. Both sides had made their moves. In that single second, it seemed many punches were thrown. Yet it was also this momentary clash that made the buzzcut man's hands tremble slightly. A hint of excitement appeared in his expression. This power, the speed, and the combat techniques, did they really come from a mental hospital? How did such a person acquire all these skills? Again, the buzzcut man turned. His fist, like wind and thunder, charged at me. I tilted my head to the left, deftly dodging the punch. Immediately after, I raised my leg and fiercely drove my knee into the man's abdomen. The man cried out in pain. His footing became unsteady. He pressed on. The opponent's reaction was also very fast. He raised his arm and began to parry. The two of them, in this narrow alley, their every strike, aided by the cover of night, was almost invisible. But it was undeniable that whether in close-quarters combat or the force of their clashing punches, both exceeded everyone's expectations. Even the man's subordinates in the distance hadn't expected. Their boss, in front of that youth, was subtly struggling to hold his own. One subordinate glanced at Li Yuefan and Zhao Min on the ground. As he thought to raise his steel pipe to threaten them, he heard the buzzcut man roar angrily during the fight. Stop. Sun Long, even if a powerful newcomer wanted this money, they would take it through proper means. If I die, it means my skills were inferior. If you use such methods, you are simply insulting me. After saying that, he threw another punch. This punch had great force, landing on my shoulder. My arm went numb from the blow, even beginning to hang limply. Yet, I didn't in the least, because of the injury, feel fear or dread. Instead, I became more excited because of the pain, even more frenzied. The speed of my punches also grew faster and faster. Sun Long, in front of me, gritted his teeth. As they exchanged punch after punch, both were beaten black and blue, until Sun Long was hit with a punch to the forehead, stumbling back several steps. Only at this moment did the fight between the two sides finally cease. Sun Long gasped for air, mouth wide open. The close-quarters combat just now had exhausted all the strength in his body. Boss, no matter what, we're all in this together. Even if he beat you, that doesn't mean he can take the person away from here. After speaking, the remaining dozen or so people swarmed forward. Unlike their boss, each of them held a weapon. I also, from my waist, pulled out that silver-white surgical knife. My waist slightly bent, As everyone came before me, the surgical knife also flashed out. Ethereal silver-white lines, like dancing butterflies. Every time my hand rose, and the knife fell, it was always accompanied by a bloody spectacle. My movements had no pause whatsoever. Sometimes, facing a pipe or long object swung at me, as long as it wasn't a fatal injury, I would respond based on my own judgment. But with such a method, under the siege of a dozen or so people, I calmly fought my way through. When I reached the midst of those dozen or so people, and arrived before Sun Long, the scalpel was still dripping blood. But some people could no longer endure the pain. Covering their bodies, they began to fall to the ground and convulse. And my scalpel was gently raised even higher, pressing against Sun Long's neck. If I exerted even a little force, Sun Long would die here. I didn't hesitate either. My eyes were filled with ferocity, madness, and a pathological distortion. Just as that scalpel was about to cut open the other person's throat, a voice suddenly exploded in the alley. "Son, don't Joanne." Mother rushed over and grabbed my hand. The brief reminder brought me back from the killing spree. "Son, I know you can't control yourself. This Sun Long isn't a bad person either. It's just that his wife and children are in someone else's hands. That's why he's involved. Have you ever thought that your strength alone is ultimately limited?" During this time, Mother has also learned. Although the Wang family and Zhou family also deserve to die, the 5 people behind them deserve to die even more. You want to make all of them your acquaintances. Someone will have to help you. Your mom is old. If one day I'm truly gone, I hope you can think more about yourself. Hearing this, my body swayed. I didn't quite understand Mother's words. In my understanding, only by resolving all dangers would they truly be safe. It seemed only a more frantic approach could make enemies feel fear, terror, and dread. Just like in the mental hospital, all the methods those nurses and doctors used on me, I would return several, even more than 10 times over, resulting in no one daring to provoke me in the end. So when I looked up, although the fierce glint in my eyes had completely vanished, I still carried a hint of blankness. Frowning, I glanced at Sun Wu, who was being pressed by the silver scalpel. Then I looked at the distance, at the dozen or so people lying in pools of blood. I didn't take my mother's words to heart. What I actually wanted to do more was to kill all these people and then go find the mastermind. My mother didn't even wait for me to speak. Instead, she reached out and gently pressed my knife down. She said to Sun Long beside her, "Have you ever considered that this is a trap someone set for you? Your wife and children inexplicably accrued so much gambling debt. Then someone inexplicably came looking for you. And immediately after you're doing these things." Sun Long had actually already resolved to die, but hearing Li Yuefen's words, he couldn't help but be taken aback. He hadn't thought about it carefully before, but now that he had calmed down, he also felt that what she said made some sense. His wife wasn't a compulsive gambler. Although his wife's best friend enjoyed playing mahjong, and often took his wife to casinos, his wife would at most play for a few thousand to 10,000 yuan. This amount of money was nothing to him. Suddenly losing 7 or 8 million, anyone would feel that something was amiss. Even so, my wife and children are in their hands. I still have no ability to resist. Sun Long clenched his fists and slammed them fiercely against the nearby wall. He only hated himself for being incompetent. Li Yuefen continued, "With your skills, as long as you're willing to investigate and follow the clues, you'll always be able to find information about your wife and children. Furthermore, even if you truly complete the task they assigned, do you dare to guarantee that they will definitely let you leave alive? Won't they just eliminate you overseas? After all, if such a matter were to be exposed, the consequences would be dire. Imagine, after your wife and children return, if they truly tell you about any problems with your personality, you probably wouldn't let the perpetrators off. In that case, your being alive is a problem, an unpredictable factor. Why wouldn't they just kill you instead of spending a large sum of money to let you leave?" What Li Yuefen said was logical and well-reasoned. Sun Long couldn't help but gasp, his voice even becoming a little shaky. "So what should we do now?" He also seemed to be losing his composure. In the end, Li Yuefen said, "My son's abilities. You should have seen them." Sun Long nodded, "Very strong. At least stronger than me. If the two of you join forces. And you say you found clues about your wife and children. Could I not rescue them?" Sun Long scratched his head. He looked at me, standing next to him, in disbelief. This guy doesn't seem like a normal person. Can he help me? If Li Yuefen hadn't stopped him, he had no doubt that this guy would have killed them all. Even I couldn't help but frown. I lightly tapped the scalpel I was holding upwards, because I thought it was too troublesome. Killing these people directly would be the best outcome. Li Yuefen, however, smiled and shook her head. He listens to me, right? My mother looked at me. I fell silent. The entire alley fell into an unsettling silence for a moment. Not denying it meant agreeing. I would indeed listen to my own mother. If mother insisted I do this, then I wouldn't kill Sun Ku in front of me. Whether or not to help him rescue his wife, that remained uncertain. Once I left my mother's sight, whether or not to help would then be a matter of a single thought. Son, I know you're definitely unhappy about this. You saw today's situation too. Dad and Mom don't have your abilities. Your sister is still lying in the hospital. If such incidents happen a few more times, can you guarantee that Dad, Mom, and your sister won't get into trouble next time? Can you guarantee you'll arrive on time every time to save us? Hearing these words, I fell silent. I truly couldn't, and I couldn't be in two places at once. But if you have a group of like-minded friends, would they stand idly by? Li Yuefan didn't force me to agree immediately. Instead, she gently guided me. She knew her son's stubbornness, and she also knew that many times, I cannot control my temper. Even a small mistake can impact those around me. Only by letting the son truly accept these people in his heart will it be possible to change the outcome. Even if one day he and his wife were to die because of certain people, his son could still rely on this group of like-minded friends to protect his sister or even protect himself. I still didn't say anything, but mother had already sensed a change in my eyes. You can rest assured. As long as you can investigate the situation of your wife and children, I believe he will help. Sun Long's mouth twitched. He still found it somewhat suffocating. After all, being able to convince a mentally ill person was in itself an extremely bizarre thing. But he seemed to have no other choice now. Auntie, you can rest assured. It just so happens that my subordinates are injured. I'll have them go to your hospital for treatment. With them there, even if they can't stop the enemy, they can delay them for a bit. At that time, send us a message immediately to notify us. We will definitely be able to protect your safety. With these words, Li Yuefan felt relieved. Actually, what he cared about more was his son. They owed the son too much. Even if they died, they didn't want this son to come to harm. Li Yuefan didn't say anything more. Instead, she pulled up Zhao Min, who was still sitting on the ground. Zhao Minor looked at me deeply. Thank you, Xiao Mei's brother. Thank you for saving me. A moment later, at the hospital entrance, Sun Long turned his head and glanced at me. Aren't you going up to see your sister? I didn't say anything. Instead, I got into a black Buick on the street. Sun Long quickly opened the passenger door and got in as well. I clenched my hands, suppressing the urge to kill Sun Long. He stepped on the gas and sped out. At this moment, in a factory in the suburbs, the three people locked inside were chained up, tied to a pillar. Sun Yaoyang, who had originally been dozing, heard footsteps coming from outside. His pupils constricted slightly. The scene where I had previously vented on the rabbit was still vivid in his mind. Thinking that the almost pathological kid was back again, his heart couldn't help but tremble. Even the other two people, after sensing the movement outside, quickly cast their gaze towards the factory entrance, but found that besides me, the person who came this time was also a man around 35 or 36 years old. His entire body's muscles were clearly visible. Every step he took gave off a heavy and powerful feeling. Sun Yaoyang, who had seen countless people, when he saw the man in his 30s walking in, his eyebrows unconsciously twitched. Then his throat moved and he swallowed. Another expert who isn't mine. Where did that kid find such a person? That shouldn't be right. This guy was just someone locked in a hospital. A mental patient for 4 years. Why does it feel like things are getting more and more troublesome? A small matter has escalated to this point. He murmured to himself. Sun Yaoyang closed his eyes, no longer looking at the incoming people. But Sun Long, who was beside him, clearly didn't intend to let him off. After coming in, he realized Sun Yaoyang was not simple. He glanced at me beside him, said with a bit of an itch to fight, "Give me the keys. I want to fight him. I didn't get enough fighting in the alley earlier." Sun Long was momentarily speechless, but still hummed, "You're different from him. Although there are techniques when fighting you, but your style is too crude and lacks proper moves, just like street thugs fighting. I really don't know why I lost to you." And although I retorted, I still threw the keys to Sun Long. Even if, deep down, I didn't think Sun Long could be of any help. But regarding my mother's words, I still took it quite seriously when I got the key. Sun Long didn't hesitate in the slightest. He opened the lock behind Sun Yaoyang. Then he pulled the person out. "You're tied up anyway. What do you say?" Fight a match, and if you win, I'll make things easier for you afterwards. Tell me what you want to eat, and I'll buy it for you. Sun Yaoyang was no coward either. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been the Wang family's right-hand man. He merely cracked his neck and charged over without hesitation. Both of them moved very quickly, but compared to me, they were still too slow. So I only watched for a few moments and no longer fixed my gaze on them. Instead, I walked over to the investigator and the driver and pulled their phones from their pockets. There should be an internal group chat for the Zhou family on your phones. Open it for me. I want to see what your Zhou family has been discussing internally these past few days. How could the two of them dare to resist? They unlocked their phone's fingerprint locks and then found the Zhou family's group chat. There were 2 groups inside, but they had already been kicked out of them. Clearly, they had also realized that the investigator and the driver were likely captured and made contingency plans. However, from some chat records, I still discovered some clues. People from the Zhou family had gone to the hospital to look for my parents. Could it be them? I somewhat suspected that the Zhou family was the mastermind, leading to my mother being ambushed in the alley. If it really was the Zhou family, then I'd have to make a trip to the hospital where Zhou Shushue was, to let them know what the consequences would be. Of course, the Wang family was also on my list of suspects. After all, their culpability was also very high. Just as I was pinching my chin and thinking for a few minutes, I heard a loud bang. Sun Yaoyang was knocked to the ground. His left cheek was swollen high, and he gasped, unable to get up for a long time. He felt an incomparable shock in his heart. The man before his eyes, just over 30, wearing a certain garb, was far more terrifying than he had imagined. If they were to truly fight, the entire bodyguard team of the Wang family, probably only Zhao Yong could contend with him. At the same time, he turned his gaze towards me, who was frowning in deep thought. It seems Xianxia is about to undergo a major change. He composed himself. Sun Yaoyang did not resist. He stretched out his hands and was tied to the pillar again. Sun Long, who had walked forward, patted his shoulder. You've got some skill, kid. Judging by your moves, you must be from the Western Sun family. What a pity. It lacks a bit of its essence. Otherwise, you might have been able to exchange a couple more moves with me. Of course, it's also related to your abdominal injury. But even if your injuries were healed, you still wouldn't last 10 moves against me. After speaking, Sun Long sat down contentedly beside him. The jade artifacts that were previously in the alley were now all gone. A night passed in the blink of an eye. I got up very early. I looked at Sun Long beside me and said, "It's time to get up." Sun Long, lying on the ground, was startled. He took out his phone and looked at it. It's only a little past 4 a.m. The sky isn't even bright yet. What are we getting up for? Last night, when you went to find my mother, who contacted you? And where was it? It's time to go settle this score with those people. Hearing this, Sun Long finally came to his senses. He also needed to find those people, to find out information about his wife and children. He immediately forced himself to perk up and followed me into the car. Half an hour later, in a secluded village at the very end, there was a small villa with rather luxurious decorations. A middle-aged man in his 40s was in the study. In front of him was a laptop and several mobile phones. Many messages kept coming in on the phones, but the man just tiredly used his hand to rub his temples. Until a woman walked in from outside, carrying a cup of coffee. "Brother Liu, why are you up so early? Has that family's matter not been resolved yet? They're just a few low-level nobodies. Are they truly not afraid of dying?" The woman's expression held confusion. She really couldn't understand why such a small issue would escalate to this point. The middle-aged man, referred to as Brother Liu, had a bitter expression on his face. Because at the location where the fight occurred last night, not only did their people appear, but also the figures of outsiders. This matter has been unresolved for a long time. In his opinion, it's very likely related to the outsiders. This time, they merely used Sun Long. In reality, Sun Long's wife and his children were not captured by them. They weren't even sure of their exact whereabouts. However, since the higher-up has already given the order, he can only carry out the mission to the end. Sun Long has disappeared. His subordinates are currently in the hospital. They didn't carry it out. It seems something unexpected happened on our end. The woman placed the coffee in front of the computer desk, her eyes fixed on the several constantly flashing phones. The grim expression on her face deepened. "No way. That guy is known as Beichuan like fire. He is most renowned for his loyalty and righteousness. Towards his wife and children, he was also famously good. This time, when he came to Shanghai, if I'm not mistaken, someone promised him an official identity. In order to allow his wife and children to escape their background in the underworld, he traveled a long distance to come here. Otherwise, with the money he earned, it would have been enough for his family to live a life of comfort and security. Brother Lu, in front of the computer desk, merely gave a sneer. Comfort and security, indeed. With the money he earned, his standard of living was only slightly better than that of an ordinary person. In the eyes of truly powerful figures, he was nothing. Just as he was about to pick up one of the phones, to check the information inside, he suddenly heard a commotion outside, followed by curses, and the sound of things being knocked over. Brother Lu slammed the table. Those guys, they haven't gotten into another conflict with the villagers, have they? I told them long ago to rein it in a bit. Our operation this time cannot be exposed. The woman beside him, however, furrowed her pretty brows. That shouldn't be. It's not time for the shift change yet. They were already extremely tired. How could they still have the energy to clash with the villagers? Besides, at this hour, the villagers shouldn't even be awake yet. But before they could finish speaking, there were a few more bangs, followed by several screams. The door to their room was kicked open. The immense force made the entire door sway precariously. Finally, I held a silver surgical knife, staring coldly at them inside. What was even more terrifying was, my other hand was dragging a corpse. From the corridor outside, one could see the trail of blood left in front of the slope. Like a grim reaper emerged from the underworld, the energy emanating from those grains, making them all unable to help but tremble deep in their hearts. Then another loud bang came from downstairs, as well as the sound of shattering glass. Soon, another person walked up from the stairwell, spitting a mouthful of bloody phlegm onto the ground, holding a large saber in their hand. He watched them with a gloomy gaze, as the lanterns revealed the newcomer. Brother Lu couldn't help but swallow, scared out of his wits. He never would have thought that his hiding place would be discovered. It was that guy named Lu. He was the one who met with me. Brother Lu's eyebrows twitched, wanting to pick up one of the phones to sound the alarm. And he couldn't stop saying, "Don't you know?" Before he could finish speaking, I had already rushed forward, grabbed the person's hair, and violently slammed their head onto the tabletop. With a crunch, the table was actually smashed, creating a crack. Seeing this, Brother Lu's face turned fierce. He didn't even have the strength to fight back. Was lifted against the wall like a little chick. Immediately after, I grabbed his hair and repeatedly slammed his head against the wall. The woman who brought the coffee screamed in fright, collapsed weakly onto the ground. Although he knew Brother Lu had handled things properly, was not really able to attack. But he hadn't expected the danger to be this severe. It was clear that person had come for revenge. As far as he knew, there were over 20 thugs in this villa alone. Yet, all of them were dealt with in a short amount of time. The other party even dragged the thugs' bodies upstairs, without any hindrance along the way. How formidable must the person who could do all this be? It goes without saying. Sun Wei, who had been standing behind, seeing that the person was about to be beaten to death, quickly stepped forward and stopped me. "Brother, wait a moment. We didn't come here to investigate the mastermind. If you kill him, who will we find?" Hearing these words, I, who had been gripping Brother Lu's head, finally paused my hand. I forcibly swallowed the surge of strength in my eyes. But then, I turned back and glanced at you, not far away. Since this person cannot be killed, then first let's kill that woman. The woman was now terrified. This was simply a madman. From rushing up until now, he hadn't said a single word. His mind was entirely focused on beating people to death. Even Brother Lu could tell that the person in front of him was clearly not normal in the head. Recalling the information he had received earlier, he realized this person was probably the psychopath marked in the data. Someone unable to control his emotions, extremely violent, a pervert who pulled out his own teeth at 7 or 8 years old. Arguing with a psychopath, was probably asking to die even faster. As for the woman next to him, he could no longer care about her. At this moment I walked over and grabbed a handful of his hair. Seeing this, the woman panicked even more. She didn't even wait for Brother Lu to speak, and quickly said, "He won't talk. Nor does he dare to. All his wealth and life are tied to that person. If he speaks, his whole family will die. If he doesn't speak, at most only he will die. Even if he opens his mouth, there won't be a single truth." Lu Gu saw this woman, with just one glance from the other party, was so scared that she betrayed him. He immediately stood up in a rage, wanting to slap her twice. But before he could rush over, a silver-white light streaked across his throat. Blood spurted out. Lu Gu clutched his neck, looking at me in disbelief. He never dreamed that the person who had been so calm moments ago would suddenly attack, and it would be a fatal blow. The blood splattered all over the woman's face in front of him. Feeling the hot blood and the suffocating fear, the woman's teeth were chattering. Sun Long's eyes widened even more, but I ignored all of that and walked step by step towards the woman. Seeing this, the woman quickly said in a choked voice, "Although I don't know much, all his secrets are in those 3 phones. I also know the passwords. I often watched him unlock them. There's no mistake. You can contact the person on the phone and arrange to meet him. You'll know if it's true or false then. Please, I beg you, don't kill me. I was just paid by him to be kept. I'm also struggling at the bottom, just trying to earn some money to live a good life. Those matters are not something I could get involved in." The woman knelt on the ground, kowtowing incessantly. The bloodiness permeating the surroundings shattered any lingering thoughts of resistance in her heart. Sun Long, fearing that I might act on impulse and even kill the woman, quickly pulled her to the side of the table and had her enter the passwords. After the phones were unlocked, several messages immediately popped up. Of the 3 phones, one was for contacting people higher up, one was for daily life, and the other was for contacting subordinates. Besides arranging for Sun Long, the man surnamed Lu had also contacted several Golden Hand experts. The benefits he promised were considerable. 2 of them were already tempted. If all these people were to make a move, I'm afraid Sun Long's subordinates might not be able to keep it a secret. Immediately after, he opened the phone he used to contact that person. Inside was a communication app. There was only one person's avatar in the app, and only this one friend. After a brief look, Deng Long slammed his fist on the table. "It's just as your mother said. They don't even plan to let me go. If I really succeeded when I was being smuggled to the open sea, they would throw me overboard. Even my wife and children weren't captured by them. Whose hands are they really in now? They don't know either." Following that, he tried to contact the person on the phone. The reply he received was okay. "Meet at Nanchang Estuary tomorrow at 8:20 p.m. A short message, but it made the woman beside him widen her eyes in surprise. She warned him not to trust that person's words. "I've been with that person surnamed Lu for at least 2 years. That person has never specified a meeting location. There are probably people watching nearby. The information here was transmitted immediately. If you don't believe me, I can also wait until after 8 p.m. tomorrow and check near Nanchang Estuary. There will definitely be an ambush. I'm just trying to survive. This also counts as helping you. You can take me back first. If what I say is true, I only ask that you spare my life." Hearing the woman's words, Sun Long, who was beside them, also became a little wary. He's not as reckless as I am, nor does he have my elusive and suffocating tactics. Especially when he just infiltrated, he discovered that he and I are not on the same level at all. I can determine the route with just one glance and find hidden cameras, silently approaching the guard from behind. Just with these methods, far surpassed him by several or even more than a dozen times. "Brother, I think this woman is still somewhat useful. How about we take her back to the abandoned factory first? Anyway, there are already 3 people in the factory. One more won't make much of a difference. One less won't make much of a difference. And of course, I also want to get more information." After a slight hesitation, it becomes easy. At the same time, in Shanghai, there was a mysterious manor. Inside, a man with a gloomy expression was sitting. He also had a large black mole on his left cheek. Looking at the real-time surveillance footage displayed on the computer, his eyes narrowed into slits. It seems Sun Long has already connected with that kid. The one surnamed Lu wouldn't dare expose my affairs. However, that woman is a menace. If there's a chance, I must make this woman disappear along with the villa's secrets. Tomorrow, I might be able to give it a try, to see if I can stake out and find these 2 people at Nanjiangkou. After speaking, his expression turned even colder. He then made a phone call. Everything after this series of actions gradually returned to calm. At the same time, I was speeding along in my car. Along the way, I also noticed several cars trying to follow me. But in just an instant, they were shaken off by more than half a street. Even Sun Long, who was sitting in the passenger seat, was dumbfounded. He hadn't expected the fighting to be so fierce, and even his driving was so impressive. The venerable sir was even more lost. After a while, a black car behind them stopped, and said to the person on the other end of the phone, Immediately after, a severe scolding came from the other side, causing the trackers to show a hint of bitterness on their faces. On the other side, I parked the car under an overpass. I got out of the driver's seat. I didn't plan on going back so soon. Regarding that homeroom teacher from the school, I still had to pay another visit. Last time I let them get away with it, but that was that. This time it wouldn't be so simple. You drive the car back first. I still have something to take care of. When I need the car, I'll send you a message. After speaking, I walked away by myself. The bright street appeared incredibly deserted. I jogged step by step towards the school, dispelling the last trace of chill from my body. I only stopped when I was covered in sweat. I then saw at the street corner, standing a girl roughly the same age as my sister, selling breakfast. It seemed the weather had turned a bit cold. The girl was rubbing her hands together, and then placed her hands near the cage where she sold breakfast, to warm them. When her hand reached out, I saw the circular scar that went through her entire palm. It looked as if something had pierced it. Couldn't help but frown. If it were before, I definitely wouldn't have felt anything about this. Ever since what happened with my sister, I vaguely felt I had a certain bottom line when it came to hurting others. After a long silence, I looked up again at the girl who was about the same age as my sister. At this moment, the girl also noticed me. After seeing my face clearly, she couldn't help but shiver, and tried to pull the breakfast cart into the alley. But the next second, due to her hurried movements, she fumbled, and the items on the small cart scattered everywhere. Accompanied by clattering sounds, the girl also fell in front of me. Seeing this, I didn't know what to say, nor did I know what I should do. I just felt that staying here, the strange emotion continuously spreading in my heart, made me feel uneasy. So I silently disappeared from the street. The girl, however, was bewildered. Looking at my retreating figure, and then at the scattered items, the fear in her eyes had not yet completely dissipated. If she hadn't remembered incorrectly, it was this person in her childhood, who had pierced her palm with a pencil, causing permanent damage to her hand. She couldn't even hold a pen. Over the years, due to the injury to her right hand, she didn't know how many cold stares she had endured. Even now, thinking about it, tears still fell uncontrollably. In the end, he silently cleaned up the mess, pulling the breakfast cart back. But when he returned to the alley, there came a sound of smashing bottles, accompanied by a man's heavy groans and a woman's pleading. The young girl walked out again, looking aggrieved. The items on the breakfast cart had already been replaced with new ones. His face was full of exhaustion. His body trembling, he stood at the street corner and continued to sell breakfast. Meanwhile, I waited at the school gate for a whole day. I didn't know if that female teacher had gotten the news, but she was no longer coming to school. After all, when I came to stake out the school that day, I encountered an ambush by Sun Yaoyang and his group. My objective didn't seem hard for them to guess. It seems this homeroom teacher definitely knows something. I frowned. Time passed bit by bit. Along with the dismissal bell, students were dismissed and people bustled about. But I still didn't see my sister's homeroom teacher. Seems she really did get the news. She probably won't be back anytime soon. I then got up from the stool and left the school with my head down. It was already very late. I was too lazy to run back to the dilapidated factory. I planned to find a random place to get a good night's rest. Near the urban village, there was a bar street. I walked through the street. I slowly walked into that somewhat chaotic area. But no sooner had I stepped in than I encountered the young girl who sold breakfast in the morning again. The young girl was holding some plates, bowls, and chopsticks in her hand, walking out of a restaurant. Her right hand, which had once been pierced, when holding those things, couldn't help but tremble slightly. The young girl clearly saw me too, and, startled, took a deep breath. She stumbled back a few steps. But, considering she was still carrying so many things in her hands, if they all broke, she didn't know how much of her salary for this month would be deducted. What if she earned less money? When she went back, she would again be beaten and scolded by her stepfather, and her mother wouldn't care about her. He only wanted to please his stepfather. As a child, his palm was pierced by someone. As he grew up, he was often beaten and scolded by his stepfather. This made him develop a very timid personality. Seeing me walk towards him, he was so scared he almost cried. Until I got close, I realized the girl's clothes were already faded from washing. I didn't know how long she had been wearing them. Perhaps because it was too cold, her small hands were already red. Even her expression was full of weariness. But I didn't say anything. I just walked past the girl, as if we had never had any interaction. Seeing this, the girl breathed a sigh of relief. She didn't dare to approach the boy who had once hurt her. Of course, she had also heard that I was a complete lunatic, fearing I would harm her again. But I, who had walked past, actually hadn't gone far. Because when I encountered this girl again, that inexplicable emotion spread through my heart once more, making me involuntarily touch my chest. It was as if someone was tugging at something inside me. Indescribable, but I just felt a bit uncomfortable. So I simply climbed from the nearby alley onto a 2-story building. Standing on the rooftop, I overlooked the situation below. I saw the girl seemed very busy. She would go in for a few minutes and come out carrying many things. When they were almost piled up, she would put on gloves, sit quietly behind the alley, washing the dishes and chopsticks. Even though she was already sweating profusely from exhaustion, even though that injured hand often trembled uncontrollably, the girl still showed no sign of reluctance. She just worked tirelessly, until a fat-headed, big-eared man, covered in grease, pushed open the back door of the kitchen. Wuxia, your salary has been settled. This month, because you knocked over a teapot and scalded a customer, the medical expenses alone cost over 1,000 yuan in compensation. And the guests' clothes weren't cheap either. So I'll just deduct 600 from you. Wuxia couldn't help but widen her eyes upon hearing this. She asked blankly, didn't the guest say I didn't have to compensate? The guest didn't say anything. But the guest probably won't come again in the future. This loss will have to be deducted from your salary. Wuxia knew perfectly well that the man was deliberately making things difficult for her. She also knew the other party would find all sorts of excuses to deduct her salary. But she didn't expect it to be so excessive this time. He deducted 2/3 of her salary in one go. If she went back like this, how would she explain it to her stepfather and mother? She would probably be in for another severe beating. So, do you want to? If not, pack your bags and get out. Seeing the obese man, covered in grease, his expression gradually turned irritable. The already timid Wuxia pursed her red lips, lowered her head and said nothing more. Boss Sure then pulled out 1,500 yuan. Don't say I don't look after you. Originally, I was going to deduct 1,600 from you. Considering your pitiful situation, I'll just deduct 1,000. Also, what do you think about the matter I mentioned to you last time? If you become my girlfriend, I'll pay your rent. You can then break free from your parents. Then you'll work for me, and I'll raise your salary to 4,000. You'll even be able to save some money. You can do whatever you want. The big-headed, big-eared man sized up this young woman. He subconsciously swallowed. His gaze gradually became unrestrained. Of course, Wuxia would not agree. Normally, when she received her salary, she would save a few hundred yuan each month. The rest she would give to her stepfather and mother. Once she had saved enough money, she would leave the city, find a place she liked, and bid farewell to those unbearable past events. She shook her head after taking the money. She then went back to washing dishes. Seeing this, the big-headed, big-eared man curled his lip. Just a stinking dishwasher. Still putting on quite an act. I can just spend 300 or 500 bucks to find one. Wouldn't she be prettier than you? With that, the boss left. And before leaving, he closed the door, as if afraid the warm air inside would be enjoyed by Wuxia. Meanwhile, on the opposite rooftop, Wu, watching all of this, his gaze remained calm. Only after the restaurant closed for the day, the portly boss, carrying a bag, humming a little tune, closed the door. I climbed down from upstairs, trailing this man, and walked into a dim alleyway nearby. The man seemed to notice something. The moment he turned his head, a massive fist instantly smashed into his face. His 2 front teeth were knocked out. Blood spurted from his mouth. He let out a shrill scream and rolled several times. When he looked up at the figure who hit him, fists, like raindrops, landed on his face. Each punch was incredibly powerful, hurting him so much he cried out in agony. Brother, I was wrong. Did I offend you in some way? Isn't admitting my mistake enough? Please don't hit me anymore. The corpulent boss's face was already black and blue. A silver-white scalpel was pressed against the boss's neck. Under the dim moonlight, a pair of ice-cold blades, a suffocating presence, stared fixedly at the boss in front of him. He could feel that if he dared to say a single no, he would probably be killed on the spot. You should have said so earlier. Isn't it just about money? If you had told me earlier, I would have given it to you already. Why did you have to beat me up like this? The boss was almost in tears. He pulled out the remaining 30,000. At the same time, he was afraid I'd find it insufficient. The gold watch on his wrist, the necklace around his neck, all his valuable possessions were taken off. This guy had absolutely no restraint when hitting people. Others riding horses would still avoid fatal vital points. But just now he saw it clearly. This guy couldn't wait to aim for vital spots. If it weren't for his good luck, dodging by shaking his head left and right, he'd probably be beaten to death right here by now. If you think it's not enough, I'll go get more for you. There are also 24-hour ATMs nearby. I'll give you however much you want. Faced with the man's words, I merely stood up. Holding these things, I silently walked away. I got 30,000 in cash from the fat boss. Adding the money I originally had on hand, I had about 60,000 in total. My pockets were stuffed full. Even if those gold watches and similar items were sold, they'd probably fetch around 10,000. I rushed along and finally found Gu Judge's business, and blocked his path. Having run into me twice in a row, and now being blocked by me face to face, it would be a lie to say Gu Judge wasn't scared. Even a fat restaurant boss could bully him, let alone me, who was crazy. What do you want? When I was little, you pierced my palm. It affected me for my entire life. Why are you still troubling me? Recalling his childhood, he remembered seeing me playing alone with sand, looking quite pitiful. He went over, wanting to join me, but I instantly pierced his palm. Lu Yu's eyes welled up again. His stepfather and mother weren't very good to him to begin with, and with that unbearable past, it made him live every day in dire straits. Watching the girl in front of him about to cry, I merely parted my lips, but I was not good with words. I didn't know what to say, so I hurriedly took money out of my pocket. I counted out 10 bills and stuffed them into Gu Judge's hand. It seemed like it wasn't enough, so I took the money in my hand and stuffed all of it into their other hand. Gu Judge also stared at the money, stunned for a long time. When they looked up again, I had already disappeared. At this moment, I sent a message to Sun Long. I waited on the spot for about over an hour. Sun Long finally arrived. Let's go. Where to? Last night, Sun Long used various methods to interrogate that woman, but was still unable to get the information he wanted. It also made him realize that trying to get crucial information from these small fry was almost impossible. If they wanted to know more, they would have to get someone with a higher status and position. For example, the person who was always mentioned in the phone. Let's go to Nanjiang Estuary to check the surrounding terrain and situation. I reclined my seat and began to close my eyes and rest. Sun Long, who was driving beside me, understood my meaning. If they could control that person, there would be plenty of ways to make them talk. So the two of them arrived at Nanjiang Estuary. In the distance, there was a large bridge. Because of the relatively remote employee, the place looked exceptionally desolate. After parking the car, the two of us began to check the surroundings. They also discovered several people in suits. They started staring at me from a distance. It seemed they had already arranged for people to be here. After squinting my eyes and checking a few times, I told Sun Long to drive away. After we had driven far away, from the opposite bank of the bridge emerged a person wearing sportswear. A man with eyes like gutters. He coldly glanced in my direction. Those two were the psychopaths my cousin mentioned. And Sun Long's street contact had died. Yesterday morning, before dawn, someone had slit their throat. The villa was also burned down. Someone also contacted my cousin, telling us to meet at Nanjiang Estuary. Even tricking Sun Long was Brother Zhao's idea. Now Sun Long clearly knew what had happened. He probably already hated us. But that sly-eyed man merely said gloomily, "Who does Sun Long think he is? How dare he run wild on Shanghai City's territory? Tonight, you all make the arrangements. Once you find them approaching, immediately call and inform me. I'd really like to test what kind of skill Sun Long, one of the 4 tigers of the north, truly possesses. As for me, he never took me seriously from beginning to end. I was just a kid who came out of a mental hospital." Immediately after, they began to arrange their manpower, completely surrounding the place inside and out. Hiding behind various covers, they silently waited for night to fall. Before they knew it, the agreed time arrived. A bright, clear moon hung high in the night sky. A silvery white glow enveloped the entire land. At this moment, Sun Long and I were also looking at those hidden around us. With the strength of the two of us, it was too easy to discover those hiding. These small fry couldn't harm us, but they couldn't possibly have only sent these people. Brother Chen, looking at the current situation, even if we go over, it will only be a bitter fight. We won't gain any advantage, nor can we achieve our goal. We might as well just go back. Sun Long frowned, having thoughts of retreating. His idea was to catch someone of a certain status and interrogate them to obtain more useful clues. But the problem was, besides the people in ambush here, there wasn't even a decoy. But in response to Sun Long's words, I merely shook my head, and walked off towards the east by myself. Half an hour later, you go out to the rendezvous. Leave the rest to me. Hearing this, Sun Long was stunned. They had set up an ambush, clearly wanting their lives. And still go out to the rendezvous? Isn't that just seeking death? Isn't Brother Chen being too reckless? And I'll go to the meeting alone. Even if I had 3 heads and 6 arms, I still couldn't defeat so many people. Sun Long still wanted to say something, but when he turned his head, he could no longer see my figure. Enraged, he punched the ground. Damn it. Do you think everyone is as elusive as you? If I had your skills, I wouldn't have been forced into this predicament. But relying on him alone, he couldn't rescue his wife and children. Could this bastard be trying to kill me? Sun Long stood there, his expression exceptionally complex. Meanwhile, I stealthily made my way to the other side of the river. Not far away, there was an alley. There were many people coming and going. Bracing myself against both walls, I climbed up to a residential building. Looking down from the other end of the residential building, I saw a black Mercedes parked at the intersection. A subordinate, with extreme deference, was bowing at the waist towards the car window. I didn't know what he was saying. Is this right ear? I narrowed my eyes. Just now, when I was on the other side of the river, I noticed something. This alley often had people coming and going. They've set up an inescapable trap. It couldn't possibly be for nothing. I just don't know how important this right ear is. And at this moment, Sun Long on the other side clenched his jaw. After a long moment, he said fiercely, I'll trust you this once. Don't get me into trouble. After speaking, he got up and walked outside. Soon, he arrived on the bridge. I, Sun Long, have come to the appointment. What kind of cowards are you, hiding yourselves? If you have guts, come out and fight me fair and square. The scoundrel from the gutter, who had been watching from the opposite bank, seeing that someone actually dared to come out for the appointment, was also momentarily stunned. After a while, he shook his head. He truly is a brute. Clearly knowing there's an ambush, he still dares to openly run out. Why would they make such a fuss to this point? Ingo Man cracked his neck. He walked onto the bridge by himself. Even the man who had been sitting in the car in the alley, after receiving the news, was also somewhat speechless. The original plan was to set a bait, intending for him to lure us out. Never expected Sun Long to be so brainless, making my trip here for nothing. It was simply a waste of time. Sun Long stood alone on the bridge, clenching his fists, looking exceptionally fierce. The man with the sunken eyes, approaching from a distance, curled his lips. He threw the short knife tied to his waist onto the ground. One of the 4 tigers of the north, boasted as unparalleled in fist arts, Sun Long, a match for any man, turned out to be a brainless good-for-nothing. But since you've come, I won't let you down either. Before I beat you to death, the people around will not approach a single step. Let's see if you have the ability to drag me down with you. Looking at the aggressive man before him, Sun Long took a deep breath. His muscles bulged, his bones crackled. His legs pushed back slightly, and instantly he charged forward like a human cannonball. The punches he threw were incredibly sharp, sweeping forth with a sound of tearing through the air. The sturdy man with sunken eyes tilted his body slightly. After dodging that punch, he also began to counterattack fiercely. The two fought at a rapid pace. Their punches carried immense power. An ordinary person would be instantly incapacitated by such a blow. Yet, during their fight, they both took several of each other's punches head-on, yet remained unfazed. At this moment, I glanced at the bridge where Sun Long was, and immediately understood. Sun Long's skill, compared to the man with sunken eyes, was still somewhat lacking. If the situation continued, he would probably be overcome and collapse within 20 minutes. The man with sunken eyes was not someone to be trifled with. If he won, he naturally wouldn't let Sun Long go. But he bought me time. Everyone around had withdrawn. There were no ambushes on either side. Only that black Mercedes was left. It seemed there was no problem. Immediately, my hand shot out. I flipped over and jumped down. Next, a punch shattered the glass. All of it smashed onto the face of the man sitting in the car. The force was terrifying. It struck his head, causing it to tilt to the left, and shattered the left side window. In an instant, his head was split open and bleeding. Upon seeing this, his face changed. He knew he had been hit. Ostensibly, Sun Long was out for an appointment, but in reality he was just someone to draw fire. That kid from the mental hospital had found the car he was in. The driver's here. You hold him off first. I'll call the people on the other side of the bridge. As long as they come, we'll still be alive. The driver no longer hesitated. He pulled a steel pipe from the passenger seat, opened the car door and got out. and saw me not far away, pulled a silver-white scalpel from my pocket, waved it towards the driver in the distance, and without hesitation, stabbed towards the face. The person with the mole. With a scream, a long bloody gash appeared on the man's shoulder. A bloody smell permeated the car, making my demeanor even more crazed. The man with the mole on his face, at this moment, clutching his injured hand, rushed out, ran towards the opposite side of the alley without a backward glance. The driver in front, holding the pipe, glanced at me. He gulped loudly. He had originally planned to block him, but felt as if he was being targeted by a savage beast. He couldn't stop trembling all over. The courage he had just mustered also vanished without a trace at this moment. His legs went weak, and he dropped to his knees with a thud. I'm just a driver. If I hadn't agreed just now, I wouldn't have lived if I went back. I won't stop you. I only beg you to spare me. After speaking, he kowtowed 3 times with loud thuds. He just kept his head pressed to the ground like that. If I were to act, I could stop his heart at any moment. But I merely walked past the driver indifferently. My speed was neither fast nor slow, yet I kept pace with the man with the mole on his face, until the other party ran out of the alley and let out a loud shout. In an instant, I gripped the silver-white scalpel in a reverse grip, aimed at his back and fiercely stabbed it in. Once, twice, thrice. The man struggled continuously, but due to excessive blood loss, his voice gradually grew weak. With a thud, he collapsed onto the ground. Blood stained my entire body. I stood on the opposite side of the river, my gaze cold and brutal. The man on the ground, bleeding profusely, I lifted him up with one hand. The fight on the bridge also approached its end at this moment. Sun Long was seen beaten beyond recognition, but compared to Sun Long he was much better off. Until they heard the miserable cries of their glorious Radiance group's second-in-command, everyone turned around with a start, and found me holding the scalpel, pressed against the man's neck. Seeing this, in a fit of rage, Sun Long, who couldn't stop vomiting blood, opened his mouth wide. Now that their leader was captured, unless those present disregarded the other party's life or death, otherwise they absolutely dared not make another move. You also know that kid came out of a mental hospital. Back then, your street contact named Lou, before he even had a chance to interrogate for information, was slit in the throat by that kid. I still feel some regret about it. I just don't know if this person who's been captured now will have such good luck. Sun Long stopped pretending. He simply lay down spread-eagled. His mood relaxed considerably. The man with the sunken eyes had a terribly dark expression. The flesh on his face twitched uncontrollably. He visibly gritted his teeth and looked towards where his boss was. Release our boss. Let's call today's matter even. I'll return Sun Long to you. Unfortunately, I didn't reply. I just pushed the man in front of me onto the blue stone seat's armrest, and raised a silver-white scalpel, and stabbed down without hesitation. The lifelong obsessive. His entire left arm was pierced through. The man let out a piercing shriek, just like a pig being slaughtered. The man with the shifty eyes mouth twitched, clearly understanding what Sun Long's words meant. Negotiating terms with a lunatic was simply out of one's mind. I can let Sun Long go. But if something happens to my boss, let alone you two, even your families will also be implicated because of this. Don't think that Sun Long's few subordinates can protect their safety. The man with the shifty eyes pulled Sun Long from the ground, gesturing for him to quickly scram. Afterwards, he just stood on the bridge, watching helplessly as Sun Long met up with me, and we left with their boss. At this moment, he instantly kicked the nearby bridge railing, letting out a hysterical roar. Sooner or later, one day, I will tear you all to pieces. At this moment, outside the junction of mountains and seas, a black Mercedes-Benz was rapidly speeding. A large dent was on the car roof, and the rear car window glass was also shattered. Gale winds poured into the room, and the surrounding obstacles were also poisoned. Yet I, who was driving, seemed not to notice. Each time, I perfectly avoided these things. Sun Luo, sitting in the passenger seat, had also clearly asked for the name of the person behind him on the way. When he heard the name Tang Hao, his heart also trembled violently for a moment. He had thought he could reel in a big fish, but he never expected the fish to be this significant. Tang Hao, the official person in charge of the Tang family, 31 years old, and furthermore, the behind-the-scenes strategist for Xianxia Construction Group. He had, on many occasions, without the Tang family's help, turned Xianxia Construction Group from danger to safety. And even without leveraging the Tang family's influence just for Xianxia Construction Group, he secured countless territories. Once, in Shanghai City, it was also dominant for a time. More importantly, Tang Hao's wife was also among the Tang family's main faction, an important lady. If Tang Hao were to die, whether it be Xianxia Construction Group, or the Tang family and even its many subordinate powers, would likely all descend into madness. The consequences triggered would truly be too immense. Looking at Tang Hao, who was still bleeding profusely, and seemed as if he could die at any moment, Sun Long's mouth twitched. Brother Chen, how about we stop the car first? What if this person dies? The consequences would be unimaginable. But I just turned my head and casually glanced. He won't die yet. Every time I struck, I avoided vital spots. He can at least cling to life for another 10 minutes or so. Hearing my words, Sun Long did open his mouth. He won't die now, but after we reach our destination. Without sufficient medical equipment, can we really save this person? Originally, he indeed wanted to capture someone of a certain status and a rather good position to obtain more important information. But the problem was, when he learned this person was Tang Hao, he felt some regret. Other members of the Tang family would have been fine, but Tang Hao implicated the interests of the entire Tang family, and similarly, it also stirred that tightly strung nerve in Shanghai City. One careless mistake could lead to playing with fire and getting burned. Even if he managed to save his wife and children, whether he could leave Shanghai City alive would likely be a problem. So, deep down, he didn't wish for Tang Hao to die here. Brother, this person's status is too significant. Can easily overwhelm someone. What if he's not dealt with in time? The sky might truly collapse that day. I still didn't stop the car. When I was in the mental hospital, I had already raised all my skills to max level. Just a glance, and I could understand this person's injuries to a great extent. With my ability, even without important equipment, I could still pull this person back from the gates of hell. What's more, last time at the abandoned factory, I bought quite a few medical supplies. But Sun Long next to me clearly didn't understand. Looking at the indifferent gaze before him, the almost emotionless face, his mouth twitched violently. He felt like he was preaching the Dao to a madman, which was like playing a lute to a cow. Subconsciously, Sun Long took out his phone. As an outsider, he more or less had his own ways of obtaining information. Having captured Tang Hao, he could probably guess the Tang family's reaction. But when he held his phone and saw the numerous messages inside, he couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. He was mistaken. The entire Shanghai was in complete chaos. Countless messages on his phone. All asked if Tang Hao was dead or alive. Only a small portion told him that now the outsider forces were being indiscriminately targeted. Nearly 60% of the forces had suffered damage. Such a large-scale operation, even at the cost of pushing the outsider forces to a dead end. From this, it could be seen just how insane the current Tang family was. Brother, things might have blown up. Sun Long's voice trembled. Yet my gaze remained indifferent, with not a trace of emotion on my face, as if listening to some trivial matter. What is the sky? If those who harmed my sister are the sky of Shanghai, then what if it's blown up? They can bully my sister, then I also have my own methods to make those high and mighty people bow down and quietly listen to sorrow. If you insist on asking who brought this disaster, then I can tell him very responsibly. My sister is the very reason. My family is their nightmare. At this moment, Tang Hao, who was behind, also slowly woke up. Numerous wounds on his body, blood was still slowly seeping out. He felt his body was extremely weak. The pain from each wound made him gasp in a sharp breath. Even a slight movement of his finger seemed to pull at his wounds. Fine cold sweat also broke out on his forehead. He glanced at the person driving. His pupils constricted slightly, remembering being pushed to the riverside, the scene on the bluestone railing, remembering this kid's almost frantic knife swings. He couldn't help but shiver with fear. According to the situation at the time, this kid truly wanted his life. If you let me go, I can make the Tang family stand down. As long as you release those two kids from the Wang and Zhou families, I can have them come out to atone for your sister's life. But if I truly die, it won't just be you, even your sister and family will all have to be buried with me. Tang Hao didn't know if the other party would listen. After all, a mentally ill person, expecting them to be rational was probably too much to ask. He only knew that on this mentally ill person now, the reason there was still a shackle was that his parents and sister were still alive. As long as they hadn't caught this guy, they wouldn't dare push the other party too hard, especially after witnessing my methods today. Even Tang Hao couldn't help but feel a chill. As for others, it was fine. With their methods of coercion and manipulation, there were 100 ways to make those people submit, just like Sun Luo in the passenger seat. A casual word from him could make the other party take risks. But I, of all people, am not a normal person. I could do anything. No one dared to bet. Tang Hao originally said these words to probe, and also to let me know his identity. But Sun Long next to him heard Tang Hao mention my sister and family, and knew something bad was coming. accompanied by the urgent sound of breaking, a silver-white scalpel was silently pulled out. Seeing this, Sun Long's face turned ashen with fright. He couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. He swiftly lunged forward, blocking Tang Hao. Immediately followed by a thud, a gash immediately appeared on Sun Long's back. If he hadn't reacted quickly, Tang Hao's throat would have been severed by now. And Tang Hao also hadn't expected that I would strike without warning. He didn't even have time to react. That silver surgical knife had already swept towards him. He truly is a madman. After I said so much, he still didn't listen. He only heard that I threatened his parents and his sister. Chun, brother, calm down. He cannot die yet. You still need to extract more useful information. And the 5 people behind harming your sister have not been found yet, have they? Sun Long endured the pain, constantly admonishing me, hoping I could regain my senses. Otherwise, once Tang Hao dies, the situation would truly be irreversible. Tang Hao himself was scared half to death. He even forgot the pain in his body. Gripping Sun Long tightly, he said, "You should know better. Control this madman. Otherwise, if I die, you, your wife, and children won't be able to leave Shanghai City." Sun Long utterly detested the person before him, but he knew this person couldn't die. At least not now. He carefully got up from Tang Hao's body. Reaching out, he gripped the silver surgical knife and also held my hand, pressing it down little by little. We finally managed to capture this person. If he dies, how will we obtain more information? Brother, be rational. Don't be impulsive. As Sun Long's words of warning continued, and as he gently pressed down, I finally gave Tang Hao a cold glance, and at last, tucked the surgical knife into my waist. Both Sun Long and Tang Hao let out a sigh of relief at that moment. Tang Hao didn't dare say anything more, fearing he might say one wrong word. Angered this lunatic again. Sun Long, in the passenger seat, gave a bitter smile. I advise you to speak less. Last time, that person surnamed Lu had his throat slit just because of a disagreement. Your words and methods might work on me, but for Brother Chun, I advise you to go easy on him. Soon, the car arrived at the abandoned factory. I took out things again to bandage Tang Hao's wound. Even without anesthetic, I stitched the wound. Even though Tang Hao struggled and screamed continuously throughout, my technique was still swift and precise. Sun Long, watching from the side, felt his mouth twitch. When everything was done, Tang Hao had already fainted from the pain. Everyone else present subconsciously swallowed. His life was somehow saved, but the suffering endured throughout. Just thinking about it made one's scalp tingle. Moreover, throughout the entire process, I seemed to, intentionally or unintentionally, slow down the speed of the procedure, extremely enjoying this bloody process. They could see that sometimes I would even deliberately open the wound, watching the blood flowing out from within. The restlessness in my eyes was faintly unconcealable. Sun Long was even afraid that while stitching the wound, I would suddenly lose control and kill the person. Fortunately, although I greatly enjoyed this process, especially when I saw Tang Hao let out shrill screams, I even more excitedly licked my lips. But in the end, after all sorts of torment, Tang Hao's life was saved. It's getting late now. Although this factory is far from the city, it's ultimately not very safe. We haven't been here long, but we've left behind quite a few traces. Looking at the fresh blood in my hand, I took a deep breath, then revealed a chilling smile. It's time to move to another place.